Chapter 4476. In the end, Natalia had been on tenterhooks all day. Apart from the trauma of the kidnapping, she was also worried about him. He had never imagined that he was so important to Natalia. Alice said to Hua Jin, "Stay with Natalia tonight. I can tell that she's worried about you. It's like she's lost her soul." Hua Jin nodded and turned to look at Gong Jie. "What about you?" "Me?" Gong Jie said, "I'll stay too." Alice said, "Okay, then," she said to Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen, "Let's go." After the three of them walked out of the room and closed the door, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen had different expressions on their faces. Alice glanced at them. "What's wrong? You look weird." "Alice, let me tell you. Yu Yu and I saw a ghost just now." Xiao Yichen walked up to Alice and said with a horrified expression, "When Yu Yu and I entered Hua Jin's room just now, we saw Uncle on top of him." The position was indescribable. It seemed like Yu Yu and Alice looked at each other. No one had mentioned to him that Hua Jin and Gong Jie had an ambiguous relationship. Obviously, Xiao Yichen was the last one to be kept in the dark. Obviously, he had not recovered from the shock of seeing Hua Jin and Gong Jie on the bed. Could it be? Xiao Yichen crossed his arms and said, "Uncle and Hua Jin were playing some kind of sumo game." Yu Yu was speechless. Alice said, "You can be more imaginative." "What else could it be?" Xiao Yichen looked at Yu Yu. "Yu Yu, what do you think?" "Uncle likes Hua Jin." No, that's impossible. Uncle has always been a straight man. How could he like men? That's just his way of doing things. It doesn't mean that it's a matter of sexual orientation. Besides, who said that men can only like women? Isn't it normal for men to fall in love with each other? Xiao Yichen said, "I think Uncle should like women." "You know it again. Xiao Yichen, are you a god? Do you know everything?" Yu Yu poked his head and said, "Besides, what does it have to do with you whether Uncle likes men or women?" Xiao Yichen came to his senses and said, "That's right. What does that have to do with me? However, you can't just make such wild guesses. It's not like we made a random guess." Yu Yu and Alice said in unison, "This is his own intention." "What do you mean? The day before yesterday or the day before yesterday?" "I forgot, but Hua Jin seemed to have run over and said that Uncle confessed to him." Pfft, Xiao Yichen almost vomited blood. "Are you serious? Are you kidding me? It's definitely not a joke." Xiao Yichen was so shocked that his soul almost left his body. In the room, Natalia had taken a shower and eaten. The room had been cleaned up. Hua Jin coaxed her into bed and sat on either side of the bed with Gong Jie. He urged her, "You haven't slept well these few days, right? Hurry up and go to sleep." "Then, what about you?" Natalia looked at Hua Jin and then at Gong Jie. "Will you leave after I fall asleep?" Hua Jin and Gong Jie looked at each other and shook their heads. Gong Jie said, "We won't leave. We'll stay here with you." I don't believe you." Chapter 4477. Natalia was afraid that they would leave quietly after she fell asleep, so she patted the bed. "Lie down and sleep together." The bed was very big. It was 2 meters wide and 2 meters long. It was not small at all for the three of them to sleep on. Hua Jin knew what Natalia was worried about, so he lay down obediently. Gong Jie and Hua Jin lay on either side of her. Only then did Natalia feel much more at ease. Nestled in Gong Jie's arms, Natalia murmured, "I miss home." She missed the home that only belonged to Gong Jie, Hua Jin, and her. This place was so unfamiliar. She was surrounded by bad memories. She could not sleep well. "When you're better, we'll go back. I'm already well nourished." Natalia pouted. "I want to go home." "Okay, sleep first, okay." Hua Jin's ability to coax children was already top-notch. Natalia said, "Give me a good night kiss." Hua Jin gently kissed her forehead. When Gong Jie saw this, he felt indignant. I want one too. Hua Jin was speechless. He thought coldly in his heart, are you a freaking child? You want a goodnight kiss? Aren't you childish? Gong Jia also stared at him meaningfully and even moved his handsome face closer. He was obviously being shameless. Natalia was amused. Ha! Hua Jin was forced to do so, but he still satisfied him and kissed him lightly on the forehead. Gong Jia was still not satisfied. That's it. That's it. Sleep. Hua Jin blushed and lay down. He hugged Natalia and closed his eyes. Natalia fell asleep very quickly. Not long after, Hua Jin was also very sleepy and fell asleep very quickly. Gong Jia, however, could not fall asleep. He propped his upper body up and laid on his side. He held his head and quietly looked at the two people lying beside him. Hua Jin and Natalia slept in each other's arms. Both of them slept very quietly. Natalia's arm was placed on Hua Jin's chest. Under the moonlight, this scene was inexplicably heartwarming. The next day, when Hua Jin woke up, Gong Jia was sleeping soundly with Natalia in his arms. He walked to the window and pulled the curtains open. The long-awaited sunlight finally poured in. The whole room was much brighter. He left the room quietly, and when he went out, he unexpectedly met Alice. Hua Jin. I heard you and Xiaoyi Chen. Hua Jin, his heart felt stifled. And these two little brats. Don't listen to their nonsense. Actually, there's nothing wrong with admitting it. After a pause, Alice's expression became serious again. Today's news is out. It's about the sanctuary. As she spoke, Alice handed the tablet to Hua Jin. Hua Jin took the tablet. Many of the world's authoritative media outlets reported wantonly. The news of the sanctuary's mass suicide that night shook the world. Such a brutal mass suicide case was extremely rare. Undoubtedly, this explosive news lasted for a long time. At the same time, the war in East Africa officially began. The International Peacekeeping Organization of the United Nations had already begun to intervene. More than 1,000 believers voluntarily took hydrogen chloride and died within seconds. Chapter 4478. Alice said, Hua Jin, the International Federation already knew that you were one of the survivors at the scene. Some reporters wanted to interview you, but they were all blocked. During this time, other than here, don't go anywhere else. Why? I suspect that there are still believers left in the sacred hall. They might already be looking for your whereabouts, which is bad for you. Hua Jin, on the other hand, was baffled. Why are those believers looking for my whereabouts? What does this have to do with me? Because you are the holy son chosen by the leader of the sacred hall. Those believers believe that as long as they complete the ritual, their leader will obtain eternal life. That's ridiculous. Hua Jin finally couldn't help it, I'm innocent. Those believers have been brainwashed. In their minds, Jim is God, and you are the holy son chosen by God. After completing the ritual, your will and spirit will make Jim's soul more indestructible, and those believers who follow him will also obtain eternal life. Hua Jin couldn't help but think about it in horror. I suspect that those believers who pretended to take the medicine are not repentant or have thought it through, but stubborn evil cult members. They must be sparing no effort to track your whereabouts. Hua Jin nodded lightly. Okay. You stay in Dark Wind Island, don't go anywhere for the time being. Alice said again, Hurricane will send mercenaries to track down the whereabouts of those believers, eliminate them, and hand them over to the International Court for trial. Those believers were not caught. No. Only one was caught. We only managed to capture one of them. The other 5 seem to have escaped and have disappeared without a trace. Hua Jin looked at the news displayed on the tablet with a heavy heart. Alice asked again, what was the situation like that day? You haven't mentioned it to me. Why did Jim choose you to be the Holy Son? Hua Jin heard this and couldn't help but sneer. You think Jim created the so-called doctrine to save those believers? He only selfishly wanted to take the money and property of those believers. In other words, even he himself knew that there was no such thing as the Temple of Light, and there was no such thing as eternal life. It was just a crooked practice that he had instilled in his followers. He needed a reason and an excuse. It is said that Jim referenced the ancient burial system of Z country. Jim regarded the thousands of believers as his slaves. He believed that after death, the soul lived in another world. The tomb is the residence of the owner of the tomb in another world. Everything is handled according to the etiquette of, death is like life, death is like life, death is like existence. After the slave owners and nobles died, they would bury their slaves with them so that they could be enslaved after death. Thousands of followers were willing to be buried with him. Even if they had souls after death, he was still the cult master with boundless glory. He's just treating a few thousand lives as child's play. Most of his followers are victims of war and bankrupt civilians. They just want to find a place to shelter them, and Jim instilled this belief in them in the name of the Temple of Light. As for him being chosen as the Holy Son, the so-called living sacrifice also came from the ceremony recorded in the Holy Sutra. Chapter 4479. Alice nodded. I'll talk to Gong Jia about this later. Anyway, it's best that you don't go anywhere except Dark Wind Island for now. Hua Jin nodded. Alice suddenly looked at him strangely. Hua Jin touched his face. What? Let me ask you, huh? How far have you progressed with Gong Jie? Alice had a curious look on her face, as if she wanted to hear some gossip. Hua Jin said. Why are you asking about this kind of gossip? Because I'm curious. Alice said anxiously. I see that you like Gong Jia, so don't reject him. Hua Jin said righteously, I'm a straight man, xie. This has nothing to do with being a straight man, right? Gong Jia doesn't like men either. It's just that the person he likes is also a man. What's the conflict? Hua Jin was speechless. What she said made so much sense that he was speechless. After Gong Jia woke up, he coaxed Natalia to wash up and go to the dining room for breakfast. Alice, Hua Jin, Yu, and Xiao Yichen were sitting together for breakfast. When Hua Jin saw Gong Jia, he immediately stood up and walked away as if he was avoiding something. I'm full. With that, he walked away as if he was fleeing from a disaster. Gong Jia sat down in confusion and snorted. It's like he's hiding from a tiger. Alice took a bite of her sandwich and giggled. Doesn't such a guilty expression mean that he's interested in you? Gong Jia looked surprised. How did you know? Let me ask you. Alice suddenly glanced at Natalia, who was standing at the side, and then hinted at Yu with her eyes. If Yu and Xiao Yichen couldn't tell, they would be fools. Hence, Yu held Natalia's hand and said, Natalia, what do you want to eat? Ham sandwich. The three little buns ran away. Alice held her spoon and narrowed her eyes. She asked mysteriously, did you kiss her? Yes, Gong Jia was shy. Although he didn't blush, there was a hint of hesitation in his tone. Did he resist? He struggled a lot. Then, did you show that disgusted expression? No. That means that Hua Jin has feelings for you. Alice was so excited that she put down her sandwich. No, it's very emotional. Why do you say that? Obviously, Gong Jia didn't think so. He even felt that Hua Jin should be very resistant to him. Alice smiled and said meaningfully, I'll teach you. You can do an experiment. Alice glanced at Zax, who was sitting not far away and eating breakfast. She said to him, touch Zax's head the same way you touched Hua Jin's head. You'll know by looking at Zax's reaction. If Hua Jin doesn't have any feelings for you, then... After 2 minutes of mental preparation, Gong Jia walked to Zax and sat down. Zax was the mercenary instructor of the Hurricane Group. He was 28 years old, young, and handsome. However, he was an upright and outspoken man. He was an extremely flirtatious man. Chapter 4480. Little Jia. Gong Jia called him affectionately. Little Jia was how Zax's girlfriend had always addressed him. Zax's face was instantly filled with horror, as though he had seen a ghost. He endured the nausea and asked blankly, "Young Master Jia, what's wrong?" "Nothing." Gong Jia rested his chin on his hand and gazed deeply at him. "I just want to quietly watch you eat breakfast. I feel that you look so good even when you're munching on a hamburger." Whoosh whoosh whoosh, Zax could clearly feel the goosebumps all over his body breaking out. He felt that his scalp was clearly tightening. This Gong Jia, what was going on? Why was he staring at him with such a strange gaze for no reason? Could it be that after returning from East Africa, he had been influenced by those evil sects and had gone mad? Zax swallowed hard. "You have a fever." "Do I?" Zax was still worried. He reached out his hand and gently placed it on his forehead. In the next second, Gong Jia gently covered the back of his hand. His seemingly unintentional action made Zax shiver all over. He was on guard and looked at him as though he was looking at a pervert. "Are you really a Gong Jia?" He suspected that the person in front of him was a demon in Gong Jia's skin. Zax slapped his hand away. "What are you doing?" Gong Jia raised his eyebrows. It was just a habitual action, but it made Zax's shoulders tremble slightly. Perhaps Gong Jia's image in Hurricane was too serious and unsmiling. Moreover, when Zax was still a mercenary, he had been ravaged by Gong Jia too much. Even if he raised his eyebrows, he would still give off a sense of authority. It was different. Zax's reaction was obviously different from Hua Jin's. Gong Jia stood up and rubbed Zax's head. Zax was obviously repulsed by such contact. He shrunk his shoulders and glared at him resentfully, but he didn't dare to say anything. Ha ha ha. Gong Jia couldn't take it anymore. Zax couldn't take it anymore. He gathered his courage and stood up. "Young Master Jia, are you crazy?" He turned his head and looked at Alice. With an aggrieved expression, he said, "Alice, is he sick? Treat him properly." Ha 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 ha. Alice laughed until she bent over the table. Oh my god. Gong Jia really went to experiment. Zax was suffering. He was being teased like this, but he didn't dare to say anything. "I just wanted to see the reaction of a straight man. Please, I'm a man. Any normal man would definitely be creeped out if another man touched his head and hands like that, okay?" Zax patted his chest lightly. "I thought you were King possessed." When the Gong Jia returned to his seat, Alice snapped her fingers with a smug look on her face. "I was right, wasn't I? You see, any normal man would definitely be very repulsed. Hua Jin is also very against it. Actually, it's not that he can't accept you, but that he can't accept himself." "Why? Don't you think that in front of you, he always has an inexplicable sense of inferiority?" Alice said quietly, "Gong Jia, you're too dazzling. You're so dazzling that no one dares to brag about themselves and get close to you. If the sun was too strong, it would burn people. If there were too many outstanding people, the light they emitted would pierce through people's bodies until they were covered in cuts and bruises." Chapter 4481. Dazzling? Gong Jia was baffled. Why would he think that I'm too dazzling? It's not just him. Even I think that you're dazzling. Hua Jin probably subconsciously thinks that you're too outstanding. He doesn't want to touch you. Gong Jia could not help but laugh when he heard that. Is that so? I think it has something to do with his past. Alice said, I always feel that he has something on his mind. All along, Hua Jin gave me the feeling that he's carrying a heavy burden. He wants to let it go, but he can't. Gong Jia, if you really like him, even if he's incomplete and flawed, you'll still like him. But Hua Jin is different. He might feel that he's not good enough for you, so he subconsciously resists, and keeps a distance from you. Gong Jia's eyes darkened when he heard that. In the afternoon, Hua Jin stayed in his room, bored to death. Yu Yu knocked on the door and pushed it open. When he saw Hua Jin lying on the sofa, he couldn't help but joke, "Uncle Hua Jin, you look like a stranded salted fish." Hua Jin turned his head and looked at him bitterly. "Have you seen such a beautiful salted fish? Why are you alone in the room?" "Sunbathing. Salted fish will dry up if they stay in the sun for too long." "I'm not a salted fish." Yu Yu urged, "Why don't we play cards?" "I don't feel like playing cards." "Let's play cards. Alice taught us a new game." "What game?" Yu Yu pulled out 2 decks of poker cards from nowhere. Poker balls originated from JS province. It was a poker game that was widely spread in the country. It evolved from the local poker games, Run Fast, and 80 Points. The game was played in pairs of 4, and the winner would level up. Make the game more entertaining and exciting. 2 people in a team would compete against each other. Whoever finished first would be the leader, and the last to finish would be the last. If a team had 1 player in the first and 1 player in the second, they would be able to level up by 3 levels. The most interesting part of this game was leveling up and getting a straight flush. There were many ways to play it, and it tested one's brain power and logical thinking. Hua Jin could not stop Yu Yu and was dragged to the chess room. Originally, Dark Wind Island didn't have a chess room, but after learning how to play cards from Yun Shishir's family, Gong Jia felt that poker games were very interesting, so he built a few chess rooms in the stadium. Mahjong tables, poker tables, everything was available. When they arrived at the chess room, they realized that Gong Jia and Natalia were there as well. Alice was teaching Natalia how to play cards. Originally, there were 4 people, Alice, Gong Jia, Hua Jin, and Yu Yu. Xiao Yichen was not very good at poker games, so he politely declined. Natalia learned how to play, and she wanted to play as well. Therefore, Alice said that she didn't want to play anymore, and she wanted to be Natalia's strategist. The teams were divided into groups, and the 4 black and red cards were used to draw teammates. For some reason, Hua Jin was assigned to the same group as Gong Jie. It was unknown if it was a tacit understanding or something else. Hua Jin probed, "There's no punishment in this game, right?" "There is." Alice said, "Truth or dare?" Again. Hua Jin stood up and wanted to leave. Chapter 4482. Alice blocked the door. "Since you're here, don't even think about leaving. It's fine if you don't want to play the punishment game, but we'll pay for it." Yu Yu and Gong Jia placed their bank cards on the table. Gong Jia's was a Centurion black gold card. Hua Jin's eyes widened. "How much?" 1 million per round. Yu Yu raised 1 finger. "Well, I'll pay for Natalia's share." Gong Jia looked at Hua Jin. Hua Jin gulped, took out his wallet, and placed a few bank cards on the table. "So much?" "No. He was poor." Although he was considered rich compared to the average person, he was not as rich as Gong Jia and Yu Yu. Moreover, 1 million per round was too much for him. Hua Jin really wanted to retreat. After understanding the game, Hua Jin still did not fully understand it. He looked at Gong Jia expectantly. At this moment, it seemed like he was the only one he could rely on. "Gong Jia, I'm counting on you." "Humph. It's fine, 1 million per round is nothing." Yu Yu added, "Yeah, if it weren't for you, we would have doubled the bombs." "Doubled the bombs? That would be at least tens of millions. Must it be so King tragic? There are winners and losers." With that, Yu Yu looked at Gong Jia evilly. "Uncle, let's fight to the death today." Alice took out her credit card machine and stood at the side, looking like she was watching a show. No wonder she didn't want to participate. Damn it, if 4 bombs were dropped, it would be close to 10 million. Although 10 million wasn't a huge amount to Gong Jia and Yu Yu, to him, it was practically bankrupt. This wasn't a game of cards, this was a game of life and death. The game started, and Gong Jia made the first move. Hua Jin was still sorting out the cards when he saw Gong Jia and Yu Yu, who were on his left, doing the paperwork at lightning speed. In just a short while, they were done shuffling the cards. Hua Jin sorted out his cards and looked at them. There were a total of 4 singles in his hand. Gong Jia made the first move, and he made a single 3. Hua Jin was delighted and eager to try. Alas, Yu Yu suddenly played a trump card. Hua Jin's hand, which was holding the single card, trembled. So ruthless right from the start. Yu Yu was sitting on top of Hua Jin and had a strong hand in the cards, while Gong Jia was sitting on top of Yu Yu and had a strong hand in the cards. It was as if the two were having a battle. 4 8s. 5 2s, 3 4 5 6 7 straights, a straight flush. 10 JH. After 3 to 4 rounds, Hua Jin didn't have a chance to make a single move. He was silently calculating in his heart. A single move was worth 1 million, and if he made a double move, then there would be a total of 5 moves. Rounding it up, it would be 16 million. He was about to faint. Hua Jin couldn't get up from the setback. He suddenly raised his hand and interrupted, let me ask you a question. If it's 1 million, is it RMB? Yu Yu reminded him coldly, I only have 5 cards left. Hua Jin was so flustered that he wanted to cry but had no tears. 16 million. This F*King invisible psychological pressure was making him so flustered that he didn't know where to go. Yu Yu looked at him, who was breaking out in cold sweat. She was slightly speechless. What happened to you? Chapter 4483. Is a million a lot? Alice hugged the card machine and was a little confused. When I was in Las Vegas, I saw a lot of rich people throw their money around. Their wins and losses were in the millions or tens of millions. Some even spent hundreds of millions. Hua Jin resisted the urge to explode. Come on, I said it myself. I'm rich. I'm not rich. I'm just a semi-retired person from the entertainment industry. Hua Jin finally caught Yu Yu's cards. Alice stood behind Natalia and taught her how to play. Shameless. Hua Jin said angrily, it's a 2-on-2, but now it's a 2-on-3. Natalia doesn't know how to play. That won't do. Alice muttered a few words. Gong Jia said, don't worry, I won. Gong Jia threw away all the cards in his hand. I won. It was a straight. Gong Jia had the upper hand. Hua Jin's eyes lit up slightly. He lost and felt that the millions were back in his pocket. Gong Jia looked at his relieved expression and did not know whether to laugh or cry. Yu Yu could only pass the card to Alice. Alice was in charge of swiping the card. With a beep, millions were transferred from the account. Is this really Dark Wind Island? This is King upgraded version of Las Vegas. Hua Jin did not like gambling because he knew that gambling was a game where you only lost and never won. No matter how good you were or how lucky you were, you could not win forever. However, as he gradually adapted to the rules of the game, his coordination with Gong Jia gradually improved, and they made great strides in the game. Unexpectedly, Yu Yu's card luck also became smoother and he slowly caught up. Most importantly, Yu Yu did not have as much psychological pressure as Hua Jin did. Moreover, not only was his card luck good, but his logical thinking was unbelievable. There were many times when Yu Yu would change the cards that he was sure to lose and he would win with different tricks. This child is so young and his card skills are so amazing. What will happen when he grows up? Slowly, Yu Yu overtook him. For the entire afternoon, Hua Jin was in a state of fear. He had tried his best, but in the end, he lost a few million. Therefore, when the game ended, Hua Jin sat on the chair dejectedly as if his soul had been sucked out. Natalia and Yu Yu looked at Hua Jin. Gong Jia could not help but laugh. Yu Yu Yu, Yu Yu Yu, Yu 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 O. Yu 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 O O, Yu Yu Yu, Yu O, Hua Jin wanted to cry. I'm not as rich as you. A few million, that's all I have. He had been dragged into this by Yu. In an instant, he had lost all his assets. Hua Jin wanted to jump into the sea. After winning the money, Yu felt refreshed. He said that he wanted to treat Alice to a drink and left with Natalia. Gong Jia stood up and walked over to Hua Jin. He gave him a little push. The next second, Hua Jin slumped on the table. Hung Men banquet, he let out a bitter sigh. Gong Jia said disapprovingly, you only lost a few million. I'll pay for what you lost. Chapter 4484. How can this be counted as yours? Since you've lost, there's no reason for you to foot the bill. The moment he raised his head, he met Gong Jia's deep gaze. He looked at him quietly, as if he wanted to dig out some treasure from his eyes. Only then did he realize that at this moment, only the two of them were left in the chess room. He couldn't help feeling a little awkward. The atmosphere was silent. When he woke up in the morning, he saw Gong Jia lying beside him, even though Natalia was in between them. When he thought of what had happened the night before, he ran out of the room as if he was fleeing. He didn't know what he was running away from. It was almost instinctive. Hua Jin felt a little guilty. Why are you staring at me? I'm going on a long trip. I'll be away for a while. Hua Jin looked puzzled. Why? Where are you going? I'm going to settle some matters. Is it dangerous? Gong Jia furrowed his brows slightly. There's a certain risk in saying it's dangerous, but there's no other way. This matter has to be settled. Do you have to go personally? Hua Jin was a little worried. If it's so dangerous, can't you leave it to someone else? Gong Jia's eyes flickered with a sharp glint. Why? You're worried about me? No. I'm just concerned as a friend. When Gong Jia heard this, he knew that it wasn't out of concern as a friend, but out of awkwardness. However, when he saw Hua Jin's worried expression, he suddenly felt a little better. So what if it's dangerous? Gong Jia crossed his arms and leaned lightly on the table. If I don't come back, won't you be more relaxed? Relaxed? Why should I feel relaxed? Otherwise, I can see that you're not relaxed now. It's as if you're guarding against me. What are you talking about? If you don't come back, everyone will be very sad. Especially Shir, she'll definitely break down. Everyone will be sad. Gong Jia suddenly lowered his head and leaned closer to him. Then may I ask, does this include you? Hua Jin was once again at a loss for words. Enough. Gong Jia ruffled his hair. I won't bully you anymore. This fellow also knew that he was bullying him. Hua Jin didn't know what to say for a moment. It seemed that the two of them were at a complicated watershed, a bottleneck. They wanted to break through, but they couldn't help but want to retreat. It seemed that they were stuck there. Just as Gong Jia was about to leave, Hua Jin mustered up the courage to stand up and say to him, Gong Jia, if it's really dangerous, don't go. Gong Jia looked at him with an inscrutable expression. Hua Jin looked at him and walked over. What's the matter? Is it convenient for you to tell me? Gong Jia suddenly reached out and pulled him in front of him. You're still saying that you don't care about me? Hua Jin, is it really that difficult for you to admit that you care about me? Hua Jin's body stiffened. He looked at his feet and felt that he was sinking deeper and deeper into a quagmire. He didn't dare to look at Gong Jia. That pair of eyes was like a deep abyss. With one look, he felt as if he had fallen into it and couldn't extricate himself. Chapter 4485. Gong Jia was about to leave when Hua Jin mustered up the courage to stand up and say to him, Gong Jia, if it's really dangerous, don't go. Gong Jia turned to look at him with an unreadable expression. Hua Jin looked at him and walked over. What's the matter? Is it convenient for you to say? Gong Jia suddenly reached out and pulled him in front of him. You're still saying that you're not concerned? Hua Jin, is it really that difficult for you to admit that you care about me? Hua Jin's body stiffened. He felt like he was sinking deeper and deeper into a quagmire. He didn't dare to look at Gong Jie. Those eyes were eyes, but they were more like a deep abyss. With one look, he felt like he was falling into it and couldn't extricate himself. Hua Jin closed his eyes and finally said, "Okay, I admit that I'm worried about you. Since you said that it's very dangerous, I don't want you to go." His words were as plain as water, but it made Gong Jie's heartbeat accelerate. How many years had it been, other than reuniting with Yun Shishir and Yueao's birth, even when he was trapped in East Africa, there was absolutely nothing that could disturb his mind. But he was like a surprise that appeared out of nowhere. Gong Jie was in a daze when Hua Jin suddenly grabbed his shirt sleeve. "If I tell you not to go, will you not go?" Hua Jin was really worried. Gong Jie smiled. "You don't have confidence in me?" "No, yeah, I have to go." Gong Jie said again, "Stay here obediently and wait for me." Hua Jin pursed his lips and didn't say anything else. There was a moment of uneasiness. He suddenly realized that Gong Jie's departure this time seemed to have something to do with him. Gong Jie saw the undisguised worry on his face. For a moment, he was in a good mood. He bowed slightly and used his unique height advantage to force him to a corner. "Do you know how much I like your expression right now?" Gong Jie, who had always been arrogant and cold and cherished his words like gold, actually said such words. Hua Jin felt very dizzy. "I don't understand what you mean by that." The next second, before Hua Jin could finish speaking, Gong Jie suddenly bent down and kissed him gently on the lips. Gong Jie couldn't help but ask for more. That boiling hot breath seemed to corrode his rationality bit by bit. Hua Jin stood rooted to the ground in a daze, neither refusing nor replying. Gong Jie grabbed his arm and wrapped it around his waist. With this, there was no longer any barrier between the two. He hugged Hua Jin domineeringly and nibbled on his beautiful neck and shoulders, so fragrant. The fragrance on his body was refreshing. Gong Jie realized that he was using the same scent as him. It was as if the scent of both of them had merged together. He couldn't tell which was his and which was his. He liked this feeling. Hua Jin, on the other hand, was so flustered that he forgot to reject the man's kiss. Gong Jie's kiss actually made him a little infatuated. All this time, no matter who he was in front of, he had always been careful to protect himself. He didn't expect that such a man would barge into his world unscrupulously and stir up a storm of blood. Hua Jin's breathing gradually became hurried. In a daze, he suddenly heard Gong Jie say, "I will come back safe and sound. Because this body, in the future, will be yours." Chapter 4486. When Gong Jie let go of him, if he wasn't leaning against the wall, Hua Jin's body would have slid to the ground. Gong Jie rubbed the boy's head lovingly and left. When Hua Jin came back to his senses and chased after him, he was already gone. At night, Hua Jin hesitated again and again. In the end, he went to find Alice and asked directly. Gong Jie said that he has something to do and needs to go on a long trip. "What did he tell you?" Hua Jin suddenly became excited. "What's going on?" "You must know." Alice looked at him as if he was an idiot. "What do you think?" "I've known Gong Jie for so long, but I've never seen him so concerned about anyone." "Because of my matter?" Hua Jin was even more shocked. "Do you think? I remember I told you that the remnants of the sacred palace haven't been completely eliminated. They're looking for you." Gong Jie received an invitation from the International Federation. Those remnants naturally have to be eliminated. Leaving them in this world is a disaster. So, was it really because of his matter? Was Gong Jie protecting him? Then, why didn't he tell him about it? Those believers are all terrorists. Hua Jin became agitated. How cruel are their methods? Won't it be dangerous for Gong Jie to go? You underestimate Gong Jie too much. Besides, there are so many people protecting him. Don't worry, he'll be fine. Even if he's fine, Hua Jin clenched his fists. What if he gets hurt? You care about him so much. I couldn't tell. I think you two have a good relationship. You think too much. Hua Jin said righteously, I just don't want him to get hurt because of my matter. You're speaking so confidently. Isn't your problem his problem? Moreover, the grudge between Hurricane and the Sacred Palace has been formed. Apart from you, he also has his own temper. In East Africa, several of his beloved subordinates died so tragically because of the Sacred Hall. He will definitely go there to take revenge. Hua Jin sat on the sofa in silence. He suddenly raised his head and asked, Can I go with him? Forget it. If you go, you'll just be sending yourself to death. Alice spat out a sentence that choked him to death. Hua Jin said angrily, In East Africa, I also put in a lot of effort and didn't drag you down. In East Africa. If it weren't for you, Shao Jia wouldn't have almost died there. Hua Jin felt so guilty that he didn't say anything. Actually, I've always felt that Shao Jia's feelings for you were a little special. I didn't think too much about it at first, and I'm sure he didn't think too much about it either. However, during his time in East Africa, perhaps because he had experienced too many calamities, he immediately recognized his feelings. You know, there are often many things that can only be figured out when one is on the brink of death. Hua Jin said, Is this the worst time he's ever offended someone? This is definitely not the worst time he's ever had. There was once when Gong Jia almost got pregnant. However, this time, the situation is different from the past. How is it different? Huh? Alice looked at Hua Jin as if she was looking at a hopeless idiot. Don't you understand? This time, you almost died. You were unconscious on the ship for so long and had a high fever when you came back. You don't know that when you were unconscious, Gong Jia thought that you wouldn't make it. You didn't eat or drink for a few days. Wasn't he the same? Chapter 4487. For many things, the closer you are to life and death, the easier it is for you to think things through. He really thought that he was going to lose you. Lying in bed, Hua Jin replayed Alice's words over and over in his mind. If it were not for her, he would not have known that he was so important to Gong Jia. Why? He could not figure out why someone as outstanding as Gong Jia would like him. Alice could not help but laugh when she heard that. Like is too abstract. Take me as an example. The first time I saw Gong Jia, I inexplicably fell in love with him. I can't remember what I really liked about him. But I vaguely remember that I was deeply infatuated with his youthful frivolity and high-spirited spirit. She liked him. Even if it was just a glance. She did not understand why she would become crazy once she fell in love with others, even though she was very rational when it came to love. When Gong Jia was infected with the Amala virus, I liked him. In order to save him, I did not hesitate to use myself as a test subject. I could not believe that there would be such a day where I would be so cruel to myself and use myself as a test subject. At that time, I actually did not have any expectations. I even thought that if the experiment failed, at least he would not be lonely with me by his side. But I never thought that because of my sacrifice, I would want him to repay me. If he liked me, so be it. Until I found out that the person he liked was you, I had no complaints. Alice laughed evilly as she said, at least I would feel better in my heart. Otherwise, I would be very sad. In Alice's room, she took out many photos of Gong Jia when he was young. When she was helping Gong Jia to tidy up his room, she felt that the photos of Gong Jia when he was young were especially cute and interesting. Hence, she secretly hid the photos for herself. Usually, she could not bear to take them out. She took out the photos and showed them to Hua Jin. In the photos, most of them were photos of Gong Jia when he was young. Alice sighed with emotion as she showed Hua Jin the signboard. Shao Jia really likes you a lot. There was an unspeakable envy in her tone. I've never seen him smile at anyone like that. Hua Jin flipped through the photos one by one. In the photos, whether it was when he was young or after he grew up, Gong Jia always had a cold and unsmiling face when facing the camera. He seemed to really hate smiling. There was a picture of the Gong family in uniform. Everyone was wearing the uniform of the Gong family's private navy. Gong Jia was standing in the middle of the last row. His gaze was terrifyingly gloomy. It was hard to imagine that the young man in the picture was actually Gong Jia in his youth. Looks like the murderous aura is very strong. His murderous aura is indeed very strong. I've always thought that Gong Jia was a very heartless and cold-blooded person. I remember there's a saying that if a person's murderous aura is very strong, then his life would be very tough. Even the king of hell would not dare to take him. We all laughed that Shao Jia would definitely live a long life, haha. Alice laughed and let out a long sigh of relief. However, Shao Jia has really changed a lot now. Other than Shishir, you've changed him a lot too. Hua Jin sighed. Me? What have I done to deserve it? Chapter 4488. When he returned to his room, Hua Jin was still absent-minded. He lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. His heart gradually calmed down. He closed his eyes and stopped thinking so much. The next day, when Hua Jin woke up, Alice told him that Gong Jia had left at dawn. Hua Jin was a little absent-minded. He didn't know why, but he had an ominous premonition. It was Gong Jia's order to arrange for Hua Jin and Natalia to stay on Dark Wind Island. After all, Hua Jin was facing many threats at that time. Gong Jia couldn't let him go as long as the remnants of the Sacred Hall were not eliminated. He didn't want to be kidnapped again. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen took a private jet back to China. Because, Yue Yao had a fever on the eve of his birthday. The two of them had stayed on Dark Wind Island for a long time. Yu Yu's condition had stabilized. They missed Yue Yao very much. Since it was Yue Yao's birthday, the two of them had decided to go back early. They didn't expect Yue Yao to have a fever. Yue Yao was 4 years old. It wasn't a small matter for a child at this age to have a fever. Yun Shishir was very nervous. The family doctor said that it was best to do a comprehensive checkup. It was safer to go to the hospital. Many children at this age contracted pneumonia because the doctor didn't do a comprehensive checkup. Therefore, she nervously carried the child to the hospital. In the hospital, Yue Yao had a fever of 39 degrees Celsius. It was said that the fever alternated between warm and cold. When Yue Yao fell asleep at night, he liked to kick the blanket because of the heat. When it was late at night, the temperature turned cold and he caught a cold. Once a child caught a cold, his fever rose quickly. The doctor suggested that he stay in the hospital for observation. During the observation period, Yue Yao's condition gradually stabilized. Then, Yun Shishir was surprised to find that she met a child in the hospital. Jing Yang. Yun Shishir had a deep impression of this child. The first time she saw this child was when she and Gu Xingze had an accident. She lost her sight and Gu Xingze donated his corneas to another child, Jing Yang. At that time, her eyes had not recovered, so she did not see what the child looked like. However, even though she couldn't see, she had held the child before. Coincidentally, he met Jing Yang this time because Jing Yang had caught a cold and had a fever, just like Yue Yao. The two children stayed in the same ward and on the same floor. Yun Shishir happened to see Jing Yang when she was fetching water for Yue Yao. He had just finished his 4-drip, and the lively little guy was clamoring to get out of bed for a walk. When he passed by Yue Yao's ward, he heard Yue Yao crying because she was taking his temperature. The little fellow curiously went to the door and bumped into Yun Shishir, who was about to get hot water. The little bun bumped into her leg. Yun Shishir did not know who he was, but she was attracted by the little fellow's handsome face at first sight. He was really cute. He had a pair of big watery eyes, and the pupils were amber. They were mesmerizing, and his long eyelashes were thick and curly. He was very cute. His skin was fairer than the average girl's, and his lips were pink. They were not too rosy, but they were not too pale either. The shape of his lips was unusually good-looking, like jelly. Chapter 4489. When he saw Yun Shishir, the little guy took half a step back timidly. He was obviously a little shy and afraid. There was still a fever patch on his forehead. So it was also because of a fever. Yun Shishir squatted down and asked him his name. However, the little guy was very vigilant. He shook his head and intertwined his hands. Obviously, he was unwilling to say and was very vigilant. Beside him, the little bun's mother rushed over. When she saw that her son had rushed to the door of someone else's ward, she quickly rushed over and bowed to Yun Shishir to apologize. However, when she recognized that it was Yun Shishir, her eyes widened in disbelief. It's you." Yun Shishir was a little surprised. "Me? Do you know me?" She was not too curious. That was because too many people knew her. However, this woman's surprise did not seem like she had seen a superstar, but an old friend. "Yun Shishir, is that you?" The woman picked up the little bun and smiled as she held the little bun's hand. She waved at her. "Come, Yang Yang, say hello to Auntie." Seeing that his mother seemed to know this auntie, the little bun opened his mouth and called out in a childish voice, "Auntie, Miss Yun, it's me. This is my son. His name is Jing Yang. Do you still remember him?" "Ah," Yun Shishir let out a short "ah." In an instant, her gaze landed on Jing Yang again, but her eyes were already red with emotion. This child was the child who received Xingjia's cornea donation. When Yang Yang was born, he was the same as other children, but as he gradually grew up, other children began to look at the world curiously. However, he lay in the crib, motionless, and didn't know how to fool around. I teased him with toys, but he didn't have any reaction. Although his eyes were wide open, they weren't focused. Jing Qi sat on the bed and chatted with Yun Shishir. Beside her, Jing Yang was lying beside Yueyao's bed. He held his little head and curiously sized up the little girl who was about the same age as him. He stared at her curiously and carefully reached out to poke her face from time to time. Yueyao had just had a fever injection and was already asleep. Yun Shishir was listening attentively. Jing Qi continued, "He was always lying still. I was afraid that something would happen to the child. I sent him to the hospital and found out that the child had a congenital cornea defect. The doctor said that it might be because I didn't get enough nutrition when I was pregnant, but he couldn't rule out other reasons. In any case, the child was born with a problem with his eyes. When I found out about this, I was so worried that I couldn't sleep well for a few nights. The child's surgery fees are a problem, not to mention the scarce source of cornea donors." Yun Shishir looked at Jing Yang and felt pity for him. Perhaps it was love for the house, love its crow. For the past few years, she had been missing Gu Xingze. In this child, she seemed to see the continuation of Gu Xingze's life. Thank you very much. If it wasn't for Mr. Gu Xingze, I wouldn't know what to do. I also thought of donating my own cornea to him, but the doctor said that the hospital doesn't have the right to perform such a surgery. I like this child. Not only is this child beautiful, but he gives me a sense of familiarity." Chapter 4490. The person had passed away, and the living were like this. Jing Qi lowered her head, feeling a little sad. She suddenly said, "Actually, I didn't know about Gu Xingze before, but after that, I went to watch many of his movies, including The Green Apple, that you guys filmed together." After a pause, Jing Qi didn't know if she should mention this. "I think Mr. Gu Xingze likes you very much, right?" "You?" Yun Shishir looked at her in surprise. "I'm sorry," Jing Qi lowered her head guiltily. "Actually, I know that with my identity, I shouldn't mention this. However, the movie The Green Apple, especially, made me cry. It's too touching. We're clearly in love, but we have to be in so much pain. I've watched this movie several times. Moreover, from this movie, I can tell that the way Mr. Gu Xingze looks at you is from the bottom of his heart. It's not an act." Yun Shishir suddenly fell silent. Jing Qi continued, "I'm very sad about Mr. Gu Xingze's accident, but I also hope that you can let him go. I think that if there's a next life, perhaps the two of you will meet again at a certain street corner. Look, fate is really a magical thing. We actually met here again and even stayed in the ward next door. Don't you think this is a magical thing? Yun Shushu heard this and agreed. She suddenly asked curiously, I've never seen your husband. Where's Yang Yang's father? When Jing Qi heard this, she suddenly lowered her eyelashes sadly, her eyes filled with disappointment. His father, what's wrong? Yun Shushu saw her melancholic expression and became uneasy. Did something happen? Just tell me. If I can help you, I'll do my best. Thank you, Shushu. But, actually, I didn't mention the child's father to you last time because I'm actually not married yet. Not married? Yun Shushu's heart skipped a beat. She inexplicably saw herself in this lonely and stubborn woman. 5 years ago, I fell in love with a man and wanted to be with him without hesitation. But now, it seems that I'm like a moth flying into a flame. Until the child was born, he had no intention of marrying me. Only then did I realize that the man I foolishly loved didn't love me. When father and mother found out that I had a child out of wedlock, they were furious and wanted me to sell the child. As Jing Qi spoke, her eyes were slightly moist. Speaking of which, I'm ashamed. Back then, I did have such an idea. Originally, when the child was born, I had the idea of marrying that man. However, when I realized that the man wouldn't marry me, the child was also diagnosed with a cornea defect. My mother convinced me that since that man didn't want me, it would be difficult for me to remarry with a child. You know, many men are very concerned about a woman's past. I thought that even if the child had the opportunity to undergo surgery, the medical fees were not something I could afford. I was thinking that I might as well entrust the child to a good family. Perhaps, he might be able to live a happier life. Chapter 4491. You have to know that this child hasn't cried much since he was born. He cried so hard that even my mother was scared. I believed that this was a telepathic connection between him and me. When we reached the door of that family, I immediately regretted it. I knelt in front of my mother with the child in my arms and begged bitterly. My mother's heart softened, so she didn't take that wrong step. Yun Shushu asked worriedly, later, did your parents accept this child? Jing Qi sighed and shook her head. No, my father didn't accept it in the end. He even threatened to cut off our father-daughter relationship. My mother's heart ached for me. Although she didn't agree with my actions and felt that this child would delay my life, she would occasionally sneak a few glances at me and the child behind my father's back. Yang Yang is very sensible, obedient, and she likes him very much. My mother likes this child now. As she said this, Jing Qi looked at Jing Yang with eyes full of love. By the bed, Jing Yang was gently fiddling with Yueyao's long eyelashes with his small hands. Yueyao was sleeping peacefully. When Jing Qi saw him, she immediately stopped him in a low voice. Yang Yang, don't touch, Mom. Her eyebrows are so beautiful. Jing Yang turned his head, his eyes bright as if there were many little stars. They're just like dolls. So cute. Little fool, those are eyelashes, not eyebrows. Oh. Eyelashes, eyelashes. Jing Yang muttered eyelashes silently. He was so young that he couldn't even distinguish eyelashes from eyebrows. Don't touch your sister. She's sick, understand? Yun Shushu smiled and said, it's okay. When Jing Yang heard this, he replied with an, oh. He turned his head and looked at Yueyao, his heart full of love. So cute. She was even cuter than a doll. This little sister was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. Jing Qi said to Jing Yang, let's go back to our room and take your medicine obediently. Then, take an afternoon nap, okay? In the past, Jing Yang would definitely listen to her words. But now, he didn't say a word. He lowered his head and pouted. It was obvious that he was unwilling. Jing Qi was surprised. Was this little guy throwing a tantrum? Jing Yang was now in kindergarten. Because of his handsome and cute appearance, he was very popular with the girls in the class. However, he liked to play with boys. Even if there were so many girls chasing after him to play with him, he would ignore them all. Although Jing Yang was well behaved in front of her, he was actually very naughty when he was with the other boys in the class. It was also from the class teacher that he found out that many girls in the class were jealous of him. Jing Qi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At such a young age, she already knows how to be jealous. However, Jing Yang, who never liked to play with girls, was unwilling to go back to the ward because of the Yueyao. Jing Qi seemed to have seen through his thoughts. Do you think your sister is very cute and want to stay and accompany her? Yes. What's her name? Yun Shishir also squatted down and looked at him at eye level. She looked at him and said, her name is Yueyao, Mu Yueyao. Yueyao. Jing Yang seriously and methodically learned to speak. Finally, he said Yueyao's name very clearly. She's sick. Jing Yang lay by the bed and looked, obviously unwilling to leave. Chapter 4492. When Yun Shishir saw this, she said to Jing Qi, since he likes to be with Yueyao, let him stay. When Jing Qi heard this, she said cautiously, will it cause you trouble? How can that be? I can't even wait to like him. Yun Shishir and Jing Qi chatted idly. At first, Jing Qi was still a little nervous. After all, Yun Shishir was a public figure and a big star. She was afraid that she had said something wrong. But later on, Yun Shishir gave her an extremely amiable feeling, and she gradually opened her mouth. The women sat together and talked about nothing more than the children's problems. As they chatted, Jing Yang let out a surprised sound. Wow! Yueyao is awake. Yun Shishir and Jing Qi turned their heads in unison and saw Yueyao slowly opening her eyes. The moment she opened her eyes, they seemed to emit a dazzling light like diamonds. Jing Yang, who was lying at the side, actually suffocated. So beautiful. Jing Yang had originally stayed by Yueyao's side out of curiosity. He saw that her face was red from fever and her eyelashes were long. Even though her eyes were closed, it wasn't hard to imagine how adorable she was. However, when Yueyao opened her eyes, Jing Yang felt that his breathing was almost stagnant. He was afraid that his breath would accidentally wrinkle such a beautiful face. Jing Qi saw that Jing Yang's face was actually red and found it strange. Yang, why is your face red? Jing Yang heard this but did not say anything. Yun Shishir also saw his red face. Yueyao opened her eyes. They flickered softly like the fluttering wings of a butterfly. She turned to look at Yun Shishir and pouted. Mommy. Yueyao hurts, where does it hurt? Head. Yueyao's speech was not very smooth. She was slurring her words, but they sounded extremely cute. When Jing Qi heard this, she immediately urged Jing Yang to say, Yang, sister says she has a headache. Do you want to rub it for her? Can I? Of course. Jing Yang timidly stretched out his small hand. Yueyao then saw an unfamiliar boy lying on the bed. She was a little scared and pulled up the quilt to cover half of her small face. She only used a pair of eyes to secretly size him up. Jing Yang's face turned even redder. However, he refused to retract his hand. Instead, he leaned forward. His small hand was carefully placed on her forehead. Yueyao looked at him and then at his hand on her forehead. She licked her dry lips and finally revealed a little of her face. Jing Yang smiled at her and immediately said, I'm Jing Yang. You can call me Yang. Yang, Yueyao was still a little shy. She was so afraid of strangers. Since she was young, other than Yun Shishir and Yu, it was difficult for others to hold her for a while. Yun Shishir was surprised that Jing Yang could touch her forehead. This child has been afraid of strangers since she was young. Yun Shishir explained, I thought she would cry when she woke up and saw Yang. So afraid of strangers. My Yang Yang has never been afraid of strangers since he was young, but this child is very smart. He was almost kidnapped by human traffickers when he was young. Kidnapped? Chapter 4493. The nurse came to make ward rounds and found Jing Yang's room. Seeing that he was not around, she went next door, but she did not expect Jing Qi to bring Jing Yang to another room. Seeing Yun Shishir and Jing Qi sitting together, the nurse was a little surprised. Ah, do you know each other? Yun Shishir and Jing Qi nodded tacitly. Yes, we know each other. Yang Yang, come over and take the temperature. Have you taken your medicine? As Jing Yang was beautiful and polite, all the nurses on the entire floor liked him. His little mouth was sweet and especially likable. Jing Qi quickly stood up. Not yet. The nurse walked over and handed the sterilized thermometer to Jing Yang. Jing Yang obediently put it in his mouth and stared at the nurse with wide eyes. He asked incoherently, "Have I recovered?" The nurse tapped his head. "You're almost recovered. Then, can I still stay here?" His words undoubtedly amused the group of people. The nurse could not stop laughing. "Yang Yang, don't tell me you can't bear to part with us and refuse to leave." Jing Yang did not speak and only looked at the nurse eagerly. The nurse explained, "When you recover, you can be discharged. You can't stay here anymore. The beds here are all prepared for patients." When Jing Qi heard this, she looked at the nurse. "Has his fever gone down?" "It's almost stable. As long as he doesn't catch a cold and try not to be exposed to the cold wind at night, it won't happen again." When Jing Yang heard that he could not stay in the hospital after recovering, he could not help but feel extremely disappointed. The nurse also took Yueyao's temperature and gave him an injection to reduce his fever, but his temperature had decreased a lot. Yueyao's mother, "Why don't you take Yueyao for a walk downstairs? While the sun is good in the afternoon, he can sweat a little and recover faster." "Okay." Jing Qi suggested, "I saw the nurse say that Yang Yang is almost recovered. He can be discharged tomorrow. Why don't we go for a walk in the hospital's back garden? The hospital's back garden is specially manicured. When I took Yang Yang down yesterday, the little guy couldn't walk when he saw the bubble machine. I didn't buy it yesterday and the little guy was angry with me. Today, I can buy one to compensate him." Yun Shishir also nodded. Mu Yazhe was not around, and Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen would only arrive the next day. She had been taking care of Yueyao the whole day. Yun Shishir carried Yueyao and Jing Qi to the back garden. When Jing Yang saw the back garden, he was very excited. He took the 5 yuan that Jing Qi handed him and ran to the hospital's convenience store to buy a bubble machine. He held up the bubble machine and ran back to Yueyao as if he was presenting a treasure. When Yueyao saw this, she was extremely moved. She gently kicked her legs, indicating to Yun Shishir that she wanted to come down. Yun Shishir hurriedly put Yueyao down, and the little guy ran to Jing Yang. When the two little guys stood together, Jing Yang was still taller. She stood on her tiptoes and reached for the bubble machine in his hand. Jing Yang was just about to give the bubble machine to Yueyao. When Yun Shishir saw this, she immediately reminded her, "Yueyao, you're not allowed to snatch it. If you want to play, you have to ask your brother if he agrees." Jing Qi was even more surprised by her good upbringing. Originally, she thought that the child of a big celebrity should be doted on since he was young. His upbringing and etiquette were not outstanding. Chapter 4494. As it turned out, while Yun Shishir doted on her child, she never neglected her education. In Yueyao's heart, Yun Shishir was very prestigious. She had never hit her, but the little girl was willing to listen to her. When Yueyao heard Yun Shishir's words, she retracted her hand and asked carefully, "Can you lend it to me to play with?" Of course, Jing Yang was willing to let her play with it. He could even give it to her. Originally, he had wanted to play with it yesterday, but because Jing Qi didn't buy it immediately and forgot to bring cash, he could only watch the other children play. When some of the children saw him standing alone, they took the initiative to come over and invite him to join them. But Jing Yang wasn't willing. After returning to the ward, the night passed. When he woke up, he was no longer interested in the bubble machine. Jing Yang had bought the bubble machine because he felt that Yueyao would like it, so it was a little like presenting a treasure. Jing Yang handed the bubble machine to her. Yueyao held the bubble machine in her hand lovingly, raised it high, and took a few steps forward happily. Yang, take Sister Yueyao to play, okay? Okay. The back garden wasn't big. Jing Qi and Yun Shishir were circling the small flower bed. The children were playing in the fitness area and could be seen at a glance. Yun Shishir could never bear to let Yueyao out of her sight. She and Jing Qi sat on the stone bench and chatted, while Jing Qi held Yueyao's hand and went to the small square to play with the bubble machine. Yueyao especially liked bubbles. On this day, the afternoon sun was especially good. Under the refraction of the sun, the bubbles that came out were colorful like rainbow balls. Yueyao loved rainbows the most. Every time a bubble came out, she would be foolishly happy for a long time. Jing Yang took the bubble machine and sprayed a lot of bubbles on her body. Yueyao suddenly felt like she was surrounded by bubbles. The moment the bubble came into contact with her body, it popped and burst. Instantly, the cool bubbles splashed on her skin, and it felt a little cool. She liked this feeling. Seeing that she liked it so much, Jing Qi kept blowing bubbles at her. A child of this age had an extremely rich imagination. It was just a bubble machine, and they could play with it. Just like that, the two little guys excitedly played with a bubble pistol for the whole afternoon. They were so happy that Yun Shishir and Jing Qi were unwilling to leave no matter how they called them. They stayed in the square. In the end, when Yun Shishir carried Yueyao in her arms, Yueyao looked at Jing Yang with an aggrieved expression, reluctant to part with him. It turned out that when they were playing, Jing Yang told her that he might be discharged from the hospital the next day, and she didn't know if she could see him again. When Yueyao heard this, he was a little absent-minded and started to feel unhappy. Yang, say goodbye to your sister. Jing Qi tempted him. Jing Yang raised his small hand, but he couldn't bear to wave it away. He just stared at her deeply, obviously unwilling to part with her just like that. But when he heard Jing Qi say that Yueyao still had to take medicine when she went back, he waved his hand sensibly. When Jing Qi carried him back to the ward, the nurse came to deliver the medicine, but he was unwilling to take it. Be good, Yang. Aren't you going to listen to mommy? You have to be good and take the medicine to recover. However, he shook his head and refused to take it. Didn't the nurse say that I'm almost recovered? Then you have to eat today's portion. I don't want to eat. It's so bitter. Chapter 44-95. Under Jing Qi's coercion, Jing Yang obediently swallowed the pill. However, when Jing Qi turned around, the little guy ran to the bathroom and spat out the pill hidden under his tongue. He didn't want to take the medicine. If he took the medicine, he would definitely recover very quickly. At that time, he would have no choice but to be discharged and wouldn't be able to see his little Yueyao. He still wanted to stay in the hospital and play with his little Yueyao. It didn't matter if he had a few more injections. At night, when the nurse came to check on him, she measured his temperature again. Yang, Xiao Bao's fever is almost gone. He can be discharged tomorrow. Jing Yang stood at the side, his eyes wide open as if he had been struck by lightning. The nurse held the thermometer and looked at Yang, who was widening his eyes. She squatted down and hugged the little guy reluctantly. Auntie really can't bear for Yang to leave. However, Yang can't stay sick forever and stay in the hospital. After he's discharged, he must be careful not to catch a cold. When Jing Qi heard that he could be discharged, she asked excitedly, won't his fever return? No, as long as he doesn't catch a cold and be exposed to the cold wind, he'll be fine. Remember, you must use warm water when you bathe. Even if you're washing your face, you can't touch anything cold. When Jing Yang heard this, his heart skipped a beat. At night. The night gradually darkened. Jing Qi hugged him and lay on the bed, sleeping soundly. In the middle of the night, Jing Yang slowly opened his eyes and sensed that his mother, who was sleeping beside him, was already breathing deeply. He knew that she was sleeping soundly. Hence, he quietly sat up, got out of bed, and carefully walked to the bathroom. Then, he quickly took off his clothes, stood under the shower, and turned on the cold water. Whoosh, the cold water poured down. Jing Yang hugged his arms and shivered from the cold water. There were only a few words from the nurse in his mind. Don't catch a cold. Don't be exposed to the cold wind. Even if you're washing your face, you can't touch anything cold. Then, what the nurse meant was that as long as he caught a cold, he could fall sick again. Thinking of this, even though the water was cold, he still gritted his teeth and endured it until his whole body was shaking. Only then did he walk out of the shower room and dry himself with a towel. Then, with wet hair, he walked to the small garden behind the inpatient building and jogged in the cold wind. After running, he was covered in sweat. He walked to the shower and continued to wash his body with cold water. The next day, the moment Jing Qi woke up, she sensed the slightly rapid breathing beside her. She raised her head and saw Jing Yang nestled in her arms with a red face. Even the breath he exhaled at this moment was boiling hot. She was scared out of her wits and quickly touched his face. It was so hot that she jumped in fright. Why was it so hot? Didn't the nurse say that the fever was almost gone? Why did the fever return? At this age, it was easy for a fever to recur. However, after getting an injection to reduce the fever in the hospital, the nurse and the doctor said that it would not recur again. This sudden relapse made Jing Qi not mentally prepared at all. She had thought that she would recover soon. Chapter 4496. In his groggy consciousness, he could not wait to see if his efforts last night had succeeded. The nurse did not know what his intentions were, so she pressed down on his little hand and carefully stuffed the thermometer into his mouth. What's going on? The nurse looked at Jing Yang worriedly, her heart aching. It looks like his fever is very bad. That's impossible. Didn't his fever go down yesterday? Didn't he cover himself with the blanket last night? That's impossible. Jing Qi said. I only dared to sleep when I saw him fall asleep. Moreover, our Yang Yang doesn't have the habit of kicking the blanket. Then why did his fever relapse? The nurse felt extremely worried. Jing Yang's head was about to split open. Last night, he seemed to have been drenched too much, so much so that he felt as if he was being burned. Even his lips seemed to be scalded by the air that he kept exhaling from his nose. However, even with that being the case, he still felt his body shivering non-stop. Jing Yang was looking forward to it. If he had a fever again, then he would be able to accompany his little Yueyao in the hospital. At the thought of being able to play with his little Yueyao, the pain he suffered was nothing. If Jing Qi and the nurse knew that the little guy they were taking care of was asking for this pain, they would definitely be so angry that they did not know whether to laugh or cry. The nurse pulled out the thermometer and looked at the red line. She gasped in shock. Oh my God, 39. 8 degrees. Why is his fever so high? It's even higher than the temperature measured when he entered the hospital. When Jing Qi heard this, she also became worried. Coincidentally, the flu had been more frequent recently. She asked worriedly, could he have contracted the flu? That's impossible. Other than the high fever, there don't seem to be any other similar characteristics. Then, why does it keep going back and forth? Before coming to the hospital, because the fever was not high, he had been using a fever patch. In addition, the nearest children's hospital had prescribed medicine. However, the fever kept going back and forth, and it was getting worse and worse. Jing Qi was worried that it was the flu and was sent to a big hospital. The nurse said, let's get an injection to reduce the fever first. I'll get the chief doctor to come over personally in the afternoon. Okay. Hearing that he had a fever again, the corners of Jing Yang's mouth curled up in relief. Then, he almost fainted and lost consciousness. When he woke up again, he was already on an intravenous drip. Because the infusion policy had become strict, especially for children, it was not easy to get infusions. But his fever was too high. The feeling of having a fever was really unpleasant. This time, it was worse than any fever in the past. But he didn't regret it. His only regret was that he had imagined that he would still be able to walk around freely after his fever. He had even gone to the little Yueyao's room to play with the little Yueyao. However, he did not even have the strength to get out of bed. He had obviously miscalculated. He thought that he had deliberately showered in cold water and was only suffering from a fever and a headache. He didn't expect that he would be so weak now. Yueyao, on the other hand, sweated a lot after taking a walk in the back garden yesterday. His temperature had dropped a little, but he still coughed a little. Yun Shushu originally thought that Jing Yang would be discharged today, but she heard that the little guy had a fever again, so she carried the little Yueyao over to have a look. Chapter 4497. Yun Shushu was also shocked by Jing Yang's flushed face. What happened? She walked over worriedly with Yueyao in her arms. Her heart ached as she looked at Jing Yang. Why is he burning up again? I don't know. When I woke up, his fever flared up again. His whole body is burning up and he's in a daze from the fever. He can't even speak coherently. Their conversation alarmed Jing Yang. He opened his eyes and saw Yueyao. He immediately reached out to grab her. Little Yueyao looked at him and then at Yun Shushu. She seemed to be using her gaze to ask what was going on. Yun Shushu patted her head and said, "Little brother is sick. He wants you to keep him company." Yueyao nodded and walked to the bedside. She pushed a stool clumsily to Jing Yang's side and then climbed onto the stool and sat down. Jing Yang was in a daze. He raised his little hand and saw Yueyao's afterimages. His fever was so high that he was seeing things and people like a spy. Yueyao also stretched out her hand and gently clasped his. She immediately felt his small, scalding hand. "It's so hot." Yueyao's voice was crisp and childish. "His hand feels like a hot water bottle. Little brother is sick. He has a fever, just like Yueyao." "But Yueyao's hand isn't this hot," Yueyao said. Yueyao was a little disappointed when she heard that Jing Yang was sick. She was bored in the hospital. She missed her daddy. Mu Yaja came once at night. But when he came, Yueyao had already taken her medicine and gone to bed early. He stayed at the hospital for a night and then went to work at dawn. At that time, Yueyao was still asleep. Hence, Yueyao missed Mu Yaja and wanted to go home as soon as she recovered. But she thought that she could play with Jing Yang while she was sick in the hospital. She liked to play with Jing Yang because she felt that Jing Yang was very interesting. However, now that Jing Yang had fallen ill, she was left all alone again. Yueyao's face was full of disappointment. Jing Yang opened his eyes, then closed them weakly. He struggled to sit up, but after a few attempts, it was to no avail. He didn't even have the strength to sit up, much less play in the garden with Yueyao. How disappointing. Alright, let's not disturb little brother. Let's just keep him company quietly, okay? Yueyao raised her head and suddenly thought of something. Yueyao wants to tell little brother a story. Okay. Yueyao ran back to the room with a 3D fairytale book. 3D Fairy Tales, SSSSS Fairy Tales Ins. It was a series of fairy tale storybooks developed by Lizhi Holdings. Li Hanlin gave Yun Shushu a set. Usually, a fairy tale would be divided into 3 volumes. Each volume was extremely heavy. Yueyao had a hard time carrying one. The book she carried over was Sleeping Beauty. Yueyao liked it very much. Almost every time before going to bed, she would let Yun Shushu read this book. She never got tired of it. Towards the end, she could almost memorize it herself. Children at this age were very passionate about things and stories that they loved. It was just like watching cartoons. They would watch them repeatedly. Yun Shushu was helpless. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But there was nothing she could do. Chapter 4498. Let me read it to you, okay? Jing Yang nodded gently. He was already very happy to have her by his side. Yueyao climbed onto the bed and leaned closer to him. Then, he opened the book in front of him and flipped to the first page. A vivid three-dimensional castle was displayed in front of him. Jing Yang had never seen such a gorgeous three-dimensional book before, and his gaze was slightly surprised. The castle had a pulling effect. He gently pushed and pulled a mechanism, and with the pushing and pulling effect, two paper figures appeared on the castle. They were the king and queen. This is the king, and this is the queen. After Yueyao introduced them in a serious manner, he said tirelessly, in the past, there was a king and queen who never had children. They were very sad and distressed because of this. Jing Yang interrupted curiously, why didn't they have children? Yueyao was stumped by this question. Oh, I know. Jing Yang remembered that he had seen an advertisement before. Infertility. However, Yueyao had never heard of this unfamiliar word before. He looked at Yun Shishir in surprise. Yun Shishir almost burst out laughing. Jing Qi was very embarrassed at the side. She secretly felt helpless about why her son had asked such an idiotic question. Yun Shishir asked with a red face, how did he know about infertility? When he followed me to buy groceries, some people would post advertisements for gynecological hospitals. Moreover, on TV, there would also be advertisements for infertility. He can read a little. He can read at such a young age. Yes. I've taught him pinyin since he was young. He likes to read very much. When he has nothing to do, he will flip through the dictionary. He can read and write many words. That's amazing. Yueyao suddenly tugged at Yun Shishir's sleeve. Mommy, what's infertility? Nothing, nothing. Yun Shishir quickly changed the topic and said to Jing Yang, let Sister Yueyao continue telling the story, okay? Okay. Yueyao turned his head and turned another page of the fairy tale book. Two three-dimensional figures appeared by a river. Yueyao fiddled with a small mechanism, and a fish floated to the surface of the water. Jing Yang exclaimed in surprise. He was instantly energized. Your wish will come true. You will give birth to a daughter soon. Yueyao said, and another night passed. In the room of the castle, the queen was holding a baby, and the king came to her side. After some time, the situation that the little fish predicted really came true. The queen really gave birth to a very beautiful daughter. The king was so happy that he could not put it down and decided to hold a big banquet. Yueyao flipped through the night, and suddenly, an evil witch appeared, bearing fangs and brandishing claws. Not only did he invite his relatives, friends, and foreign guests, but he also invited almost all the witches to send their kind wishes to his daughter. There were a total of 13 witches in his kingdom, and he only had 12 golden plates to entertain them, so he only invited 12 witches, leaving one uninvited. Jing Yang nodded when he heard that. Chapter 4499. When the 11th witch had just blessed her, the 13th witch, the one who wasn't invited, came in. She was very angry that she wasn't invited. She wanted to take revenge by offering her vicious spells. So when she came in, she shouted, the king's daughter will be hurt by a spindle at the age of 15 and finally die. Jing Yang was dumbfounded when he heard that. No one had ever told him such a fairy tale since he was a child. In the Mu family, Yun Shishir had been continuing the tradition of bedtime stories. When Yueyao was very young, she was very happy to tell her some fairy tales. Yueyao and Yu were different. Yu didn't like to listen to fairy tales. She just listened to Yun Shishir's voice and fell asleep peacefully. But Yueyao really liked to listen to these fairy tales. Later on, Yu designed a series of 3D books for her. Yueyao loved these exquisite 3D books so much that she could not put them down. She listened to Sleeping Beauty no less than 10 times, but she didn't get tired of it. Jing Yang listened with relish, and from time to time, he asked some questions that made Yueyao feel helpless. Is there really such a witch in the world? Is the princess dead? Many questions always made Yueyao feel helpless. In the end, Yun Shishir personally came forward to answer. On the side, Jing Qi praised, little Yueyao's storytelling ability is too strong. Generally, children of this age are generally not clever. Yun Shishir smiled and said, Yueyao doesn't speak very well. It's just that she has heard these stories too many times, so she can speak so fluently. Yueyao lay on the bed and turned a page of the book. A castle shrouded in darkness. In the gorgeous floor-to-ceiling window, there was the figure of the princess lying on the bed. When she was 15 years old, the past and the queen were not there. The princess was left alone in the palace. She walked around the palace, looking at all the big and small rooms. Finally, she came to an ancient palace. Inside the palace there was a narrow staircase, at the end of which was a door with a golden key. When she turned the golden key, the door sprang open, and an old woman sat inside, busily spinning. When the princess saw her, she said, "Hello, Granny." "Spinning," replied the old woman, nodding her head. "What are you doing?" "Spinning," replied the old woman, nodding her head. "This little thing is really interesting when it spins." Then, the princess stepped forward and tried to pick up the spindle, but as soon as she touched it, she immediately fell to the ground and lost consciousness. The old spell really came true. Is the princess unconscious? Not only the princess, but all the people in the castle, including the horses and dogs, the tall people on the roof, the flies on the walls, and the rats in the holes, all fell asleep. The past and the queen have returned. Didn't a kind witch say that this dangerous spell would indeed come true, but the princess would be able to avert the danger? She won't die, she'll just fall asleep, and she'll sleep for 100 years. That's right. The entire castle is surrounded by hedges. Many princes came to explore, but they were all blocked by the hedges. Yueyao saw that Jing Yang was engrossed in listening and felt smug. Chapter 4500. Yun Shishir and Jing Qi watched the two little guys quietly. Yueyao was talking enthusiastically, and Jing Yang was also fascinated. For a while, he didn't feel sleepy. After telling the story, Jing Yang had already closed his eyes in a daze. After hearing that the princess was finally woken up by the prince's kiss, he also fell asleep peacefully. It's just a fairy tale, Jing Qi lowered her voice and said, "Look, children are so easily satisfied. Even if it's a perfect ending in a fairy tale, he can sleep peacefully. The world of children is innocent and simple. They're easy to satisfy." As Yun Shishir spoke, she picked up Yueyao and said to her, "It's time for you to take a nap." "Okay." Yueyao rubbed her eyes. It was obvious that she was sleepy. She yawned loudly and let Yun Shishir carry her to sleep. In the afternoon, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen finally rushed over. When they found out that Yueyao was sick, they rushed back without stopping for a moment. When they found out that Yueyao's fever was gradually subsiding, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen breathed a sigh of relief. The two of them guarded Yueyao on both sides. Looking at Yueyao's peaceful sleeping face, Yu Yu felt especially sorry for her. "I feel that sister's face doesn't seem so rosy anymore. She has been injected with fever reducers for 2 days in a row. She has suffered a lot. Wouldn't it be too boring for Yueyao to stay in the hospital alone?" Yu Yu said dejectedly, "I should have rushed back earlier, but I thought that as long as I came back before Yueyao's birthday, it would be fine. I didn't expect Yueyao to suddenly fall sick. The temperature difference during the change of seasons is huge, and she has the habit of kicking the quilt." Yun Shishir paused for a moment before continuing, "However, Yueyao has been fine these few days in the hospital. She's not bored. There's a little brother around her age who's playing with her." "Little brother?" When Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen heard this, they immediately became alert. Where did this little brother come from? Yun Shishir was stunned. It can't be, these two fellows, were they even jealous of this kind of thing? "That kid is just next door." Whoosh, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen disappeared into the next room at lightning speed. The door to the room was ajar. Jing Qi went to prepare the medicine. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen gently pushed the door open and saw a child with delicate features lying quietly on the bed with an 4 drip. His fever was too serious, and some of his tonsils were inflamed. He had to be put on a drip to reduce the inflammation. In order to find out who was trying to kidnap his sister, Yu Yu slipped into the ward and saw a familiar name on the pathology report on the table. Jing Yang. It's him. Yu Yu walked to the side of the bed and took a look. No wonder he felt that this child was very familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. Ah, it's him. Yu Yu suddenly remembered. Xiao Yichen asked curiously, you know him? Yes. Do you know who Gu Xingzi donated his cornea to? Could it be him? Yes. I remember that the child's name is Jing Yang. I've seen that child before and I remember his eyes. Although his facial features have changed a lot, his eyes haven't changed at all. Chapter 45:01. As soon as Yu Yu finished speaking, Xiao Yichen could not help but flick him on the head. You still have the cheek to call others children. You're a child too, okay? How dare you use such an old-fashioned tone? Yu Yu glared at him and bounced back. I'm older than him, okay? You're saying that he's the recipient of Uncle Xingzi's cornea? Yes. For some reason, Xiao Yichen was filled with emotions. This world is too small. I also heard that Uncle Xingzi donated his cornea to a child. It said that he has a congenital corneal defect. Initially, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen were filled with righteous indignation towards this brat who wanted to abduct their sister. However, when they found out that Jing Yang was the child who had received Gu Xingzi's cornea, they could not resist for a moment. For some reason, they believed that Gu Xingzi had not disappeared. Instead, he had always been there. However, through the cornea donation, his life had been extended. And Jing Yang was proof that he still existed. In the afternoon, Jing Yang finally woke up. Jing Qi sat beside him, but her expression was no longer as loving as before. Instead, it was surprisingly serious. You're awake. Jing Yang looked at her interrogative expression and felt a little uneasy. What's wrong? Mom. Answer Mom's question honestly. Yes, did you sleep obediently by Mom's side last night? Jing Yang had never lied, and he did not like to lie. However, even if he did not lie about this matter, he could not admit that he did not sleep obediently by his mother's side. Jing Yang hugged the blanket and covered half of his face. He hummed guiltily. Mom doesn't like children who lie. Mom, I'm not lying. Then, a nurse told me that in the middle of the night, she stood on the balcony and saw you running around the back garden. Jing Yang was so scared that he burped. He had been discovered. And, Jing Qi grabbed the wet hospital gown that Jing Yang had hidden in the bathroom and asked even more seriously, what's going on? Why is this gown so wet? There were a total of 2 sets of hospital gowns in the hospital. Early in the morning, Jing Qi planned to wash Jing Yang's hospital gown, but she couldn't find it. In the end, she found it in the corner of the bathroom, as if it had been deliberately hidden. Jing Yang felt even more guilty. He hid almost all of his face under the blanket, only revealing a pair of restless eyes. No one knows a child better than his mother. Jing Qi understood this child. He must have lied, but what was the purpose of lying? Also, why did he go jogging in the garden instead of sleeping well at night? Yang, answer me honestly. Where did you go last night? Did you catch a cold from playing in the garden last night? Jing Yang couldn't hide it any longer and could only nod silently. Why? Jing Qi was angry. Why don't you sleep obediently by Mommy's side? Because, Jing Yang pouted and said sadly, I want to be sick. I want to be hospitalized. Jing Qi was stunned. She had thought of countless answers, but she did not expect such an answer. Which child liked to be hospitalized, sick, and in the hospital? Chapter 45:02. Jing Yang lowered his head and gently moved his lips. He then confessed in a lonely manner, I want to play with little Yueyao. The nurse said that I'm about to recover and will be discharged today, but I don't want to. If I'm discharged, will I never be able to see her or play with her again? Jing Qi sighed helplessly. So it was because of this? So, this idiot didn't hesitate to get wet and run around the back garden in the cold wind in order to play with Yueyao. Ah, she remembered. Yesterday, the nurse had mentioned in front of him not to be cold and not to be exposed to the cold wind. This guy knew how to apply what he learned. Jing Qi asked tentatively, "Do you like Sister Yueyao so much?" Jing Yang nodded excitedly. "What do you like about her?" "She's so beautiful. Like a little princess." Pfft, Jing Qi almost fell to the ground. So, it was because Yueyao was good-looking? Did her son look at faces like this? What else? She tells me fairy tales. But you can't get sick just to play with her. Jing Yang immediately lowered his head guiltily. Mom, I know I was wrong. I won't dare to do it again. Jing Qi patted his head, feeling sorry for him. Don't do such a stupid thing again. Besides, even if you're discharged from the hospital, you can still play with Sister Yueyao. Jing Yang's eyes widened in surprise. Really? Yes, when the time comes, Mom just needs to ask Yueyao's mother for her contact information. When you're out of school and on vacation, Mom can take you to play with Sister Yueyao. Okay. But before that, you have to recuperate. First, your fever has to go down. Okay. Jing Yang immediately obeyed and lay on the bed obediently like an obedient little angel. In the afternoon, Yueyao woke up from her afternoon nap. As soon as she opened her eyes, she ignored her two older brothers and asked Yun Shishir to play with Jing Yang. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen were extremely hurt. This younger sister of his had completely ignored them. He didn't even notice their presence. Yun Shishir reminded her, Yueyao, look who's back. It was only then that Yueyao noticed Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen, who looked extremely disappointed. He was a little surprised. You guys are back. Idiot Yueyao, did you just notice us? Yueyao smiled, revealing her white teeth. She then turned around and asked Yun Shishir, Mommy, where's brother Yang Yang? Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen looked at each other. They were furious. They couldn't help but worry that when Yueyao grew up and got a boyfriend, she would completely ignore her two older brothers. Xiao Yichen said, Yueyao, can't you play with your older brother? Older brother isn't fun. Xiao Yichen was indignant. Which part of him isn't fun? Yueyao pouted and didn't know what to say for a moment. Yun Shishir looked at the two little lads who were jealous of Jing Yang. For a moment, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Yu Yu stretched out his arms and wanted to hug Yueyao. Yueyao, let's play together, okay? Raise me high. No. Yueyao shook her head. I want to play with brother Jing Yang. Yu Yu smiled awkwardly and secretly blacklisted Jing Yang. Chapter 4503. Mom, is brother Yang Yang awake? I think so. He's probably on an 4 drip now. When Yueyao heard this, she immediately lifted the blanket. Then I'll go play with him. Hey, wait. Yun Shishir called out to her and said reproachfully, don't run so fast. What if you fall? I know. Bring this orange to brother Yang Yang. Yun Shishir had inadvertently heard Jing Qi mention that Jing Yang especially liked to eat oranges. Okay. Yueyao obediently took the orange and ran to the ward next door. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen looked at each other. They could see in each other's eyes the grievance of being neglected by their beloved little sister. You can't be alone with that rascal like your little sister. Xiao Yichen leaned over and muttered to Yu Yu, otherwise, what if little sister is kidnapped by that rascal? When Yu Yu heard this, she instantly became nervous. Her expression turned serious, but she also felt that it made sense. We can't let them be so close to each other and improve their relationship for nothing. Xiao Yichen added fuel to the fire by Yu Yu's ear. You have to know that many childhood sweethearts cultivate their relationship from a young age. Okay. Anyway, let's go over and watch over little sister. If that rascal dares to flirt with her, I'll definitely teach him a lesson. Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu instantly had a tacit understanding that they had a common enemy. It was as if they were brewing something big. Yun Shishir didn't know what the two little buns were mumbling to each other, but she saw that they looked nervous and alert. Before Yun Shishir could finish asking, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen walked to the ward next door. Yun Shishir was speechless. Why did these two rascals look like they were going to catch adultery? When they arrived at the ward next door, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen entered. They saw Yueyao sitting by the bed with an orange in her hands. Jing Yang was leaning against the headboard with an 4-drip in his hand. I'll dial it for you. Yueyao held up the orange and said proudly, I've seen how my mommy peels an orange. Yueyao can do it too. When Yuyao walked in, Jing Yang had just finished changing his 4-drip. She knew that he was still on an 4-drip and couldn't peel the orange. However, when she saw Jing Yang's greedy expression, she volunteered to peel the orange for him. When Xiao Yichen saw this, his nostrils flared. He had never eaten an orange peeled by his sister. Come on. Nothing. Yes. Even Yu Yu and Mommy had never enjoyed such special treatment from Huiyao. How could Jing Yang have the upper hand? Xiao Yichen felt that his position in Huiyao's heart was being threatened. He walked over and pouted as he said to Yueyao, I want to eat an orange too. Yueyao and Jing Yang were looking at each other sweetly when Xiao Yichen appeared at the wrong time. Yueyao then realized that Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen were also in the ward. She asked in a childish voice, Why are you here? We knew you were sick, so we rushed back. But when you saw us, you ignored us. Yueyao imitated Yun Shishir's tone and lectured them, You're already so old. Do you still need me to play with you? Seriously. Jing Yang found Yueyao's tone amusing and couldn't help but laugh. Xiao Yichen's eyes were almost spitting fire. What are you laughing at? Chapter 4504. Jing Yang immediately stopped smiling. Yu Yu stared blankly at the orange in Yueyao's hand. She pouted and said coquettishly, Yueyao, why aren't you peeling the orange for big brother? I'll peel the orange first. Yueyao's little hand gently rubbed the orange until the peel loosened. Then, she gently dug her index finger into the center of the orange and carefully peeled the peel. She peeled the orange very carefully. Her fair and adorable fingers peeled off the peel bit by bit. As the orange had been rubbed properly, it was very thin. When she finished peeling the orange, Yuyao was surprisingly patient. Bit by bit, she peeled off the white peel on the fruit pouch. The white peel was edible, but it affected the texture slightly. Every time Yun Shishir peeled an orange for Yueyao, she would peel off the white peel bit by bit. This made the texture even sweeter and more perfect. Yueyao imitated Yun Shishir's actions and slowly tore off the white fruit along the lines. However, this process was extremely long. Moreover, Yueyao's fingers weren't very nimble. She peeled and paused for a while. Before they knew it, 5 minutes had passed and she had only peeled off half of the peel. If it had been any other time, Xiao Yichen would have lost his patience. However, since the person peeling the orange was Yueyao, he was happy to be patient. Yu Yu, Jing Yang, and Xiao Yichen stared fixedly at Yueyao as she peeled the peel. It was as though just watching her peel the white peel was exceptionally interesting. Finally, I'm done peeling. Yueyao proudly waved the peeled orange in front of the three of them. Look, I'm done peeling it. Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu stretched out their hands at almost the same time. However, Yueyao quickly retracted her hands. This orange isn't for you guys. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen's fragile hearts were about to shatter when they heard this. If it's not for us, then who is it for? Mommy said that big brother Yang Yang likes to eat oranges. As Yueyao spoke, she peeled the orange in half and prepared to divide it into pieces for Jing Yang to eat. Jing Yang's hand was on an 4-drip, so Yueyao was about to feed him. This was a special treatment that Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen could only wish for. Xiao Yichen panicked and began to whine. Yueyao, I want some too. Why aren't you giving it to Big Brother? Yu could not care less about being reserved. This was the first orange Yueyao had peeled in her life. It had an incomparably special meaning. It was as if this was not an ordinary orange, but a century-old longevity fruit. It was as if eating this longevity fruit would make one immortal. However, Yueyao couldn't bear to give it to them. Instead, she passed the fruit to Jing Yang. However, Jing Yang didn't dare to reach out to take it. This was because Yu and Xiao Yichen, the two siscons, were staring at him covetously. It was as if the two of them would pounce on him if he reached out to take it. Jing Yang swallowed awkwardly and said quietly, "Why don't we have a competition? Whoever wins gets to eat the orange peeled by Yueyao. What do you think?" Xiao Yichen immediately perked up when she heard that Jing Yang wanted to play a game with them. "Tell me, what game?" "I don't want to play if it's too easy." Jing Yang said, "How about playing one half?" When Yu heard this, she didn't think much of it. Tisk, childish. Chapter 4505. Are you scared? You don't dare to compete with me? Jing Yang said proudly, "I'm very good at playing wooden dummies." Are you trying to provoke me? Yu raised her eyebrows. I won't fall for it. If you don't accept the challenge, then you're giving up. Jing Yang pretended to take the tangerine. Then this tangerine is mine. Wait. Xiao Yichen was anxious. Isn't it just a game of wooden dummies? Let's compete. I'm not afraid of you. Sure. Jing Yang sat up calmly. Come on, who wants to compete with me first? Me. Xiao Yichen's desire to win was aroused. He sat down on the bed. 3, 3, 4, 4. We're both wooden dummies. Don't talk and don't move. As soon as he finished speaking, Jing Yang and Xiao Yichen looked at each other motionlessly as if they had been petrified. Xiao Yichen was known for his impatience. Although he was able to keep his composure at first, after a minute, his eyes suddenly became very sore and he only dared to blink gently. Yu's mouth twitched when she saw the two of them looking at such a boring game so seriously. They were playing so seriously. Moreover, when they said they couldn't move, they really couldn't move at all. This game was very simple in the beginning. As long as they didn't move, there would be no problem. However, once they sat for a long time, their necks would become sore, their shoulders would swell, and their bodies would itch terribly. Especially when the wind blew in through the window, it didn't feel very cold through the thin layer of clothes. However, Xiao Yichen could clearly feel the wind blowing into his eyes. It was itchy, dry, and teary. He wanted to rub his eyes, but if he did, it would be obvious that he was the one who moved first. He would lose. Hence, he deliberately widened his eyes until they turned red. He gritted his teeth and persisted until he was unwilling to give up. On the other hand, this game of wooden dummies was very easy for Jing Yang. It was his best game. He had been born with a cornea defect since he was a child. This meant that he had been immersed in darkness for a long time as a baby. Babies also had curiosity. Being trapped in the darkness for a long time, they would also be curious about the outside world. However, due to the prolonged darkness, he had to keep his eyes open for a long time. Even if he didn't blink, he wouldn't feel any discomfort. Jing Yang had never lost to anyone in this game of wooden dummies. Xiao Yichen was no exception. 10 minutes later, Xiao Yichen finally couldn't hold it in any longer. He blinked his eyes. Initially, he wanted to pretend that he didn't blink, but Jing Yang found out. I saw it. You blinked. Xiao Yichen rubbed his eyes awkwardly. This guy's eyes were really sharp. He had blinked so quickly, but he had been discovered. So boring. Even though Xiao Yichen was unwilling to admit defeat, he had no choice but to admit defeat. He and Jing Yang had been glaring at each other for a long time. Their eyes were bloodshot, so much so that they looked extremely red. You, compare yourself to him. Xiao Yichen was still annoyed. If I had persisted just now, I wouldn't have lost. Humph, I can't let him get away with this. When Yu Yu heard this, he sat on the bed in disdain and faced Jing Yang. I'll compete with you. Jing Yang smiled. It didn't matter who competed with him. Chapter 45:06. Initially, he had thought that this game was extremely boring. However, for the sake of the orange peeled by Yue Yao, Jing Yang was willing to do anything. 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, we're all blockheads. Don't talk and don't move. Yu Yu and Jing Yang did not move an inch after that. Xiao Yichen considerately closed the window. If the window had not been open, he would not have lost so badly. At that time, he wanted to remind Yu Yu to close the window. However, he could not move his mouth or speak. He hinted many times, but Yu Yu did not even notice him. Hence, he gave up. However, since Yu Yu was going to compete with Jing Yang, he had to close the window to prevent the same thing from happening. After the window was closed, the wards suddenly became quiet and there was no more wind. Jing Yang calmly opened his eyes and stared at Yu Yu without moving. Xiao Yichen suddenly thought of playing tricks. He sneaked behind Yu Yu and rubbed his nose. He made funny faces and racked his brains to make Jing Yang laugh. However, Jing Yang did not even look at him. Did he have no presence at all? Xiao Yichen stuck out his tongue. However, no matter how he tried to provoke him or make him laugh, Jing Yang did not react. He only stared at Yu Yu silently. The two of them stared at each other for more than 10 minutes. Oh God! For more than 10 minutes, he did not move at all. Xiao Yichen thought that it would be over in 3 minutes at most. He was such a restless person. Making him sit in the same place without moving was undoubtedly a torturous torture. However, it was not a problem for Jing Yang at all. It seemed that he had underestimated this kid called Jing Yang. He stared at Yu Yu without moving an inch. Just like that, another half an hour passed. Xiao Yichen did not know how many times he had yawned. Yue Yao looked at Jing Yang and then at Yu Yu. He also felt bored. Don't compete anymore. Jing Yang and Yu Yu did not reply. They were still holding their breaths. Jing Qi came back with hot water and saw the two children sitting face to face, motionless like statues. She felt strange. When she saw that Jing Yang's infusion bottle had been hung up, she rushed over and rang the bell. The nurse rushed over. As soon as the nurse entered the room, she was also confused by this scene. What's wrong with the two children? Jing Qi was also stunned. I don't know what happened either. When I came back with hot water, I saw the two of them sitting facing each other without saying anything. Xiao Yichen reminded Jing Qi not to speak. They're playing games. What game? 123 blockhead, whoever moves or speaks will lose. Wooden man. Jing Qi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why are these two kids playing such a boring game? Xiao Yichen explained, whoever wins will be able to eat Yue Yao peeled oranges and enjoy the treatment of a national guest. This was not an exaggeration at all. Whether it was Xiao Yichen or Yu Yu, Yue Yao's first personally peeled oranges in his life was simply a luxurious national guest treatment. Otherwise, Yu Yu, who had always been mature and steady, would not be willing to play this game with Jing Yang. He was very serious. This game was too childish for him. However, for the sake of Yue Yao's oranges, he did not care about his reputation. Another 10 minutes passed. Chapter 45:07. Another 10 minutes passed. Yu Yu's eyes were visibly redder and he didn't dare to blink. Jing Yang wasn't any better. He stared and somehow became cross-eyed. Jing Yang didn't notice it, but Xiao Yichen wanted to laugh when he saw it. However, he was afraid that his laughter would affect Yu Yu's performance. After all, laughter was contagious. Hence, Xiao Yichen tried his best not to laugh. However, even though he could control himself, Yu Yu might not be able to do the same. He and Jing Yang were sitting opposite each other. Hence, he could see Jing Yang's adorable cross-eyed expression. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. He really wanted to laugh. However, he couldn't control himself anymore. Yu Yu tried his best to control himself. Yun Shishir rushed over. When she saw this scene, she couldn't help but walk over and scratch the soles of their feet. Wahahaha. Pfft. Ha 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 ha. The two little guys couldn't control themselves and were already on the verge of breaking down. Now that Yun Shishir had scratched the soles of their feet, they couldn't control themselves anymore. Mommy. Yu Yu regained his serious expression and turned to look at her angrily. Why are you scratching the soles of my feet? Stupid teammate. When did I become your teammate? Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she said, when I walked in, I saw the two of you staring at each other. Jing Yang's eyes were almost cross-eyed. Jing Yang and Yu Yu asked in unison, who's the big-eyed one and who's the small-eyed one? At this moment, the two of them seemed to have a tacit understanding. Yu Yu said in disdain, of course I'm the big-eyed one. Your eyes aren't as big as mine. But my eyes are definitely not small either. Anyway, my mommy said that I'm the big-eyed one and you're the small-eyed one. Yu Yu, who had always been cold and aloof, was angered by Jing Yang and argued with him like a childish child. At the side, Yun Shishir suddenly felt a sense of helplessness. They could even argue over such a childish question as who was the bigger eye and who was the smaller eye. Wasn't this a little too exaggerated? Yue Yao held the peeled orange and was dumbfounded. When Yu Yu saw this, he immediately walked over. His arrogant attitude towards Jing Yang was gone. Instead, he gently squeezed her little paws. Yue Yao, can you give the orange in your hand to Big Brother to eat? Yue Yao recovered and looked at Yu Yu before looking at Jing Yang. Then, she said softly, no. Not good. Not good, not good, Yu Yu's handsome face twisted. It was as if he had been frozen. Yue Yao carried the orange and walked to Jing Yang's side. She smiled at Jing Yang and said, this orange was originally for Big Brother Jing Yang. This orange was originally for Big Brother Jing Yang. This orange was originally for Big Brother Jing Yang. This sentence kept echoing in Yu Yu's ears. Jing Yang took the orange in a daze. He broke it in half and gave one half to Yue Yao. The two of them looked at each other and smiled warmly. Yu Yu half knelt on the ground as if he had been struck by lightning. He supported himself with both hands as if he had suffered a great blow. Xiao Yichen didn't know why, but when he saw Yu Yu breaking down, he wanted to laugh. Chapter 45:08. He walked over, knelt on one knee, and patted his shoulder gently. It's just a tangerine. Do you have to be so dramatic? A tangerine? Yu Yu suddenly clenched his fists and stood up. He said angrily, is this just a tangerine's problem? Xiao Yichen was speechless. What other problems could there be? This is a matter of status, dumbass. Yu Yu turned his head and looked at the two people who were having a good time. Jing Yang and Yue Yao were eating tangerines, laughing as they fed each other. That scene stung a certain someone's eyes. Ah, I'm going crazy. At night, Mu Yaja arrived at the ward. The first thing he saw was not Yue Yao, who was sitting on the bed reading a comic book. Instead, he saw Yu Yu sitting on the sofa in the corner. The reason why he noticed him at first glance was because he could feel the endless resentment coming from him the moment he entered the room. Yu Yu crossed his arms and leaned against the sofa. He looked out of the window as though he had been petrified. Who was the one who was sick? Mu Yaja pointed at Yu Yu and looked at Yun Shishir. He asked in surprise, what's wrong with him? Is he sick? He seems fine. Yun Shishir said helplessly, your son is fine. He's not sick. Then why does he look so gloomy? This, Yun Shishir touched her nose and waved at him as though she wanted to whisper something to him. Mu Yaja leaned over curiously. He's obviously jealous. Jealous? Mu Yaja was confused. Who is he jealous of? Yue Yao. Yun Shishir told him everything that happened in the afternoon. Mu Yaja's lips twitched when he heard this. It's just a tangerine. Why is this guy so useless? But the first time Yueyao peeled an orange, he personally asked her for one. In the end, Yueyao didn't give it to him and gave it to Jing Yang. Yu Yu was obviously jealous. Mu Yazhe looked at his son with disdain. That's his sister, not his wife. Sister complex, Yun Shishir said calmly. As a father, how could he not know that his son is a sister complex? You know that Yu Yu loves Yueyao the most and Yueyao has always had a special place in Yu Yu's heart. Yueyao also loves Yu Yu the most. But, ever since Jing Yang appeared, it seems like Yu Yu's position in Yueyao's heart has changed. How is this possible? Mu Yazhe didn't think much of it. He's thinking too much. That's what I told him, but he refused to listen. Since this afternoon, he has been curled up in a corner. He's been in a bad mood. What about Yueyao? Yueyao said that she wants to read more fairy tales. Then, she'll tell Jing Yang stories. Mu Yazhe's lips twitched again. No wonder Yu Yu was in such a bad mood. Yueyao was really good to Jing Yang. Even he found it a little strange. Oh yes, be careful. Try not to let Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen catch a cold. Yun Shishir regained her composure. What's wrong? Chapter 4509. Quarantine. Yun Shishir suddenly became nervous. Is it that serious? Then, what about Yueyao? Will Yueyao catch the flu? It is said that there are a few suspected cases in this hospital. Of course, this is internal news. The Ministry of Health does not dare to make a big deal out of it. They are still analyzing the degree of contagion for fear of causing panic among the public. Of course, regardless of whether it is true or not, don't go anywhere other than the ward. Oh, I understand. Yun Shishir nodded. For the past 2 days, Yueyao had been very obedient. Initially, she wanted to go to the back garden with Jing Yang to play. However, because she was worried about the flu, she asked Yueyao and Jing Yang not to go anywhere outside the ward. Yueyao read a lot of fairy tales at night. Although she was still young, she had already started to learn how to read. Moreover, the comic books had pinyin, so she learned a lot of new stories and told them to Jing Yang. Yu Yu became even more depressed these days and fell ill. It was not because she was too sad that she fell ill, but because she caught a cold. Yun Shishir became alert and asked the doctor about the cause. Because it was sudden, the doctor was not sure. Hence, he took a blood sample and said that the results would only be out in 2 or 3 days. In these 2 or 3 days, Xiao Yichen also fell ill. In addition, another child that Yun Shishir did not expect was also sent to the hospital. It's you. Yun Shishir stood in the corridor and looked at Chu Ho, who was holding a hot water bottle. She was so shocked that she could not speak. Chu Ho was also a little surprised to see her. Why are you here? Yun Shishir frowned and said, the 3 children are sick. They caught a cold and are hospitalized now. Chu Ho immediately became nervous when he heard this. The 3 children are sick. They all caught a cold. Yes. Yun Shishir asked again, what about you? Xiao Bao caught a cold and was hospitalized. The doctor said that he might have contracted a new type of influenza and is now in a semi-isolated state. So serious? Yes. Haven't you noticed that many children are inexplicably hospitalized with a cold? The 4 major children's hospitals in Beijing were all overcrowded, and there was a shortage of beds. It's a change of season, and the weather has been fluctuating between hot and cold recently. When Xiao Bao caught a cold at first, I didn't take it to heart and kept asking the family doctor to give him injections and medicine. But after a week, he suddenly had a fever. I was really worried, so I wanted to send him to an authoritative hospital. Unexpectedly, the doctor said that he might have contracted a new type of influenza. I heard that there are already deaths in another children's hospital. Death cases. Yun Shishir was shocked. She had been following the news, but she had never heard of any deaths. Why haven't I heard about it? I'm quite concerned about this matter. It's the news from this morning. There will probably be a report tonight. Chu-ho asked with concern, are the three little guys okay? We've already taken a blood sample and submitted it for testing. Because the hospital has been overcrowded recently, many doctors have been temporarily transferred to other hospitals. The test results will probably only be available in a few days. So we can't be sure if they have contracted the influenza. Chapter 45:10. Fortunately, Qianqian and Ruirui have not had much contact with Xiao Bao. Otherwise, the doctor said that such a young child would not be able to withstand the influenza virus. His life might be in danger. Yun Shishir felt a lingering fear when she heard this. It was not that she did not notice it, but who would have thought that a new type of influenza virus would suddenly appear? She also noticed that there were a lot of children hospitalized recently. Moreover, the symptoms were surprisingly similar. They all started with a simple cold, followed by a high fever that did not subside. It would always recur. It would clearly subside, but the fever would return. No one thought that it was the flu. Lin Shi always slept in the same room as Xiao Bao, but Qianqian and Ruirui slept in another room. However, Chu-ho was still very nervous. He asked an authoritative doctor to take a look at him personally. After the doctor confirmed that there was no problem, Chu-ho was relieved. However, Xiao Bao is already in a state of semi-quarantine. It seems that the new type of influenza is real. We'll just have to wait for the announcement. Semi-quarantine. Yun Shishir could not help but be curious. What do you mean by semi-quarantine? There can only be one parent watching over him. Because Qianqian and Ruirui are at home, he is worried, so he volunteered to stay and take care of Xiao Bao. Yun Shishir returned to the ward, feeling a little uneasy. The ward was very big. There were a total of 4 beds. Yun Shishir originally wanted to let Yueyao stay in the VIP ward, but it was said that the VIP ward was already booked. Since he was already in it, it was impossible to chase him out. Therefore, Yun Shishir let Yueyao stay in a slightly more ordinary ward. In the end, all 3 of the 4 beds collapsed. Yu was fine. However, even Xiao Yichen could not withstand it. It was enough to show how fierce this new type of childhood influenza was. Soon, the test results were out. Yu was suffering from a new type of childhood influenza, so she had to be quarantined as soon as possible. All the children who were in contact with Yu had to be quarantined as well. This meant that Yueyao, Xiao Yichen, Yu, and Jing Yang would all be sent to the isolation ward. Furthermore, only one parent was allowed to accompany the child. Yun Shishir was a little dumbfounded when she heard the results. The doctor and nurse hurried over and took Yueyao and Xiao Yichen's blood samples, saying that they needed to conduct further tests. Jing Yang naturally couldn't escape either. He only had a common cold, but because Yueyao and Yu were also implicated, Yun Shishir could not help but feel guilty. She repeatedly apologized to Jing Qi. Although Jing Qi was worried, she didn't say anything. If it's really a new type of childhood flu, it's inevitable even if you leave the hospital. It's actually a good thing to be able to diagnose it as soon as possible. In short, let's just wait and see. Okay. The next morning, the doctor and nurse walked over and sent the 3 children to the isolation area. When she entered the isolation area, Yun Shishir had to wear the special isolation suit provided by the hospital. She wore a blue level 2 isolation suit, a mask, and even transparent protective goggles. Yun Shishir felt uncomfortable wearing this kind of isolation suit. She put on the isolation suit and walked into the isolation area. She happened to see an extremely tall man standing in front of her. Yun Shishir recognized his astonishing aura at a glance. This man was Gu Jinglian. She walked over and took a look. Gu Jinglian also turned around and was a little surprised to see her. Chapter 45:11. Gu Jinglian said, Xiao Bao and Yueyao are in the same ward. Do you know that? Huh? Yun Shishir said, I don't know. I only know that the 3 children have been arranged to stay in the same quarantine area. I asked the hospital to arrange it that way. Gu Jinglian paused for a moment before he continued, the ward is already crowded. There are 6 beds in one ward, so it's just right for the 5 children. They can also take care of each other. 6 beds. Is it really that crowded? The ward is not small. Even if there are 6 beds, it won't seem crowded. Although it was called a quarantine area, it was not as exaggerated as being completely isolated. It was far from being fully armed. Before Gu Jinglian and Yun Shishir entered the ward, they heard Xiao Bao's voice from afar. Aha! Just right, 19 points. Come, pay up. WeChat and Alipay are both accepted. Gu Jinglian frowned deeply. He exchanged glances with Yun Shishir and seemed to have understood something. He quickly walked into the room and saw a few children surrounding a table. The children were all wearing masks, but it could not hide their fierce aura. Yu Yu, Xiao Yichen, and Xiao Bao sat at the table while Jing Yang watched from the side. Yue Yao stood next to Jing Yang. She was wearing a mask. Although she did not understand what was going on, she opened her eyes wide and watched curiously. Xiao Bao, Yu Yu, and Xiao Yichen were gambling. You're so proud of 19 points. Yu Yu flipped the cards in her hand and snorted coldly. Did I say anything when I got 21 points? Xiao Bao heard this and immediately leaned over to look at the cards in Yu Yu's hand in disbelief. 10, 2, 9. It was exactly 21 points. This game was played by 2 to 6 people. Apart from the Joker, there were 52 cards. The goal of the players was to make the total points of the cards in their hand not exceed 21 points and try to make it as big as possible. Once the number exceeded 21, it would be considered a win. If it did not exceed 21 points, then the person closest to 21 points would be the winner. This was a very classic gambling game. Gu Jinglian had taught Xiao Bao how to play this game. After entering the hospital, Xiao Bao secretly took out the poker cards he had hidden in the hospital to play. Because of Gu's instructions, the children were all assigned to the same ward. The relationship between the Gu family and the Mu family had eased over the past few years. Occasionally, they would visit each other and meet each other at gatherings. The children were already very familiar with each other, so they did not feel awkward and did not feel awkward being in the same ward. After entering the ward, she had to stay in the ward all day and couldn't walk around. Other than eating and sleeping, she could only watch boring TV programs. Because the semi-quarantine area was filled with children, Peppa Pig was playing on a loop on the TV. At first, he watched with great interest. But after a long time, they inevitably felt bored. Hence, Xiao Bao suggested that they play 21 points and asked if anyone wanted to participate. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen ignored him at first. Then, Xiao Bao started to mock them. I'm not targeting anyone. Forgive me for being blunt, but everyone here is trash. It would have been better if he did not provoke them. After he mocked them, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen immediately sat down at the card table. Xiao Bao came to the hospital with tens of thousands of yuan. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen were not short of money. Hence, after they agreed on the end of the game, the children gathered in the hospital to gamble. Chapter 45:12. What surprised Yu Yu was that he had thought that Xiao Bao was only good at martial arts. He did not expect Xiao Bao to be so good at blackjack. After a few rounds, there were wins and losses. Yu Yu did not have much of an advantage over Xiao Bao. However, since Xiao Bao had made his threat, Yu Yu would definitely not admit defeat. Yu Yu had never played blackjack before, but he understood it after Xiao Bao explained it once. Xiao Bao relied on his experience, while Yu Yu relied on his IQ. Yu Yu was very smart and learned everything quickly. Blackjack was not difficult. It required 80% luck and 20% courage. The most important thing was to dare to go all out. In the beginning, Xiao Bao was quite pleased with himself when he got a small advantage from Yu Yu. However, in the third and fourth round, Yu Yu's luck got better. In addition, he was more familiar with the rules. Xiao Bao lost 4 rounds in a row. Ouch! Xiao Bao collapsed on the table and started to lose his temper. How is that possible? You got exactly 21 points in 2 rounds. Do you know how to cheat? Gu Qingze, you have to admit defeat. You did not care if he admitted defeat or not. He was the one who suggested blackjack, and he was also the one who questioned him about cheating. You cheated. The winner cheated? What kind of logic is that? Also, I can't afford to lose a few thousand yuan. Do you want to cheat? Yu had a sharp tongue. Xiao Bao would not gain anything from arguing with him. Gu Jinglian and Yun Shishir stood at the door. Their eyelids were twitching violently. Yu had just shuffled the cards when he saw Yun Shishir and Gu Jinglian standing at the door. He was so frightened that he threw the cards away. Mommy. He completely ignored Gu Jinglian, who was beside him. Gu Jinglian was also used to his disregard. When Xiao Bao saw Yu's reaction, he turned around in confusion. However, Gu Jinglian had already walked up to him and grabbed his ear. Wah! Daddy! You're still calling me Dad. I don't have a son like you. Wu, who are you trying to embarrass by losing to someone in blackjack? Yun Shishir was completely speechless. She originally thought that Gu Jinglian had walked over aggressively to teach Xiao Bao a lesson about gambling. But in the end, it was because of this. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't find anything wrong with it. After all, Gu Jinglian had been immersed in gambling since he was young. He could not be too casual about gambling. As his son, playing cards was indeed not a big deal, but he lost too badly. Xiao Bao said pitifully, What? I didn't want to lose to him. He had good luck, so how can you blame me? Luck is also a part of one's ability. Xiao Bao started to sell his father out. If you're so good, why don't you play around with Yu? If you can beat Yu, it's not too late to say such sarcastic words. I think you definitely can't beat Yu. His luck is too good. Had he ever seen such a son? Pushing his own father into a fire pit? Asking him to play blackjack with a 10-year-old kid? Whether he won or lost, it wouldn't look good. If he won, it would only be seen as an adult bullying a child. If he lost, it would be even more embarrassing. However, if he didn't play with Yu, it would look like he had a guilty conscience. Gu Jinglian gritted his teeth in hatred. How could he have such a stupid son? Seeing this, Yu also started to put up a banner. Gu Jinglian, if you feel indignant on behalf of Gu Qingze, why don't you play with me too? Chapter 45:13. Gu Jinglian glared at him coldly. Yu, on the other hand, was not afraid of the tiger. He glared back fiercely. Come on, let's decide the winner in one round. I'm not playing with you. You're guilty. You're scared. Get your father to play with me. My father needs to go to work. He needs to work. Who would be like you? Gu Jinglian was so angry that his face turned ashen. He had actually been bullied by Yu, this little b** starred. Moreover, he had been ridiculed to the point where he could not retaliate. Yun Shishir quickly came over to smooth things over. Yu, don't mess around. I'm not messing around. You're not allowed to provoke Uncle Gu. Okay. Yu listened obediently, but secretly gave Gu Jinglian a thumbs up. When Gu Jinglian saw this, he gritted his teeth even harder. He turned around and looked at Yun Shishir. Where's Muyaja? He asked. He's at the office. What's he doing at the office? He's at work. Come here. Gu Jinglian was obviously serious. Tell him that his son provoked me. Why did it feel like Gu Jinglian was complaining? Half an hour later, Muyaja arrived. He had originally planned to rush over after dealing with the company's affairs. Although only one guardian could enter the quarantine area, his 3 children were in the hospital and he was worried about being alone at home. Just then, Gu Jinglian called and said that there was something urgent. He thought that something earth-shattering had happened and hurried over. However, when he entered the ward, he saw Gu Jinglian sitting at the table with a deck of poker cards in front of him. Mu Yaja was stunned. What was going on? When Yu Yu saw him, she immediately ran over and said to him, "Daddy, Gu Jinglian wants to play blackjack with you. You have to work harder. You can't lose, okay? His son's skills were not as good as mine, so he lost to me. I asked him to play with me, but he said that he would not lower himself to the same level as a child, and that it would only count if he played with you." Mu Yaja looked at Gu Jinglian speechlessly. "Are you a child? So childish?" Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows. "Sit." Mu Yaja sat down in front of the table. Gu Jinglian immediately dealt the cards, one open card and two hidden cards. One round to decide the winner. "Wait." Mu Yaja frowned. "You want to play blackjack with me? What is it?" "I won't." Mu Yaja said, "I rarely play cards." Gu Jinglian said, "Your son knows how to play blackjack, and you're telling me you don't? Who are you lying to?" Mu Yaja said innocently, "I really don't know how to play." "Do you think I'm you?" Gu Jinglian was speechless. He deeply suspected that Mu Yaja was pretending to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. How could he not have come into contact with blackjack? "Then what do you know?" Mu Yaja said, "If it's two people, I'll play cat fishing." "Cat fishing?" Yu Yu leaned over curiously. "Daddy, you really don't know how to play?" Mu Yaja lowered his voice. "I've played before, but I forgot the rules." You're such a scammer. Who would be happy to play blackjack with him? Who is he? He grew up in the casino. You can't afford to offend him. The president of Xingyu Financial Group was actually scared. Yu Yu despised him. "Daddy, you're such a coward." Mu Yaja didn't think much of it. So be it. Daddy doesn't earn money to gamble. It's to support the three of you. These words were very pleasing to Yu Yu's ears. Why was his daddy so virtuous? Chapter 45:14. Gu Jinglian snorted coldly. "Are you a sore loser?" "That depends on what you're betting on." Mu Yaja suddenly leaned closer and said meaningfully, "If you want to bet, why don't you bet on something big? I'm quite interested in the Gu family mansion. Why don't you use the Gu family mansion as your capital?" Gu Jinglian's gaze sharpened. This Mu Yaja was quite good at speaking without thinking. The Gu family mansion. Every inch of that land was worth a fortune. It had been preserved for hundreds of years, and every brick was worth a fortune. Even the Cultural Relics Bureau had estimated the price of the carvings on the eaves. This piece of land was worth half of the Gu Corporation's shares. It was a mansion that was more expensive than a courtyard house in the capital. Why? You can't bear to part with it? Are you feeling guilty? Mu Yaja mocked expressionlessly. It seems that President Gu is not so sure about winning. His provocation was only because he had set his sights on the Gu family's main residence. If Gu Jinglian was willing to take out the Gu family's residence as a bet, Mu Yaja would really be willing to follow the bet and give it his all. Get lost. Ha! Yun Shishir was speechless. Why are the two of you acting like children? So childish. Mu Yaja complained to his wife innocently, "Madam, he provoked me first." Even in front of Gu Jinglian, Mu Yaja showed his true colors of a henpecked husband. Gu Jinglian said coldly, "It seems that President Mu is also a henpecked husband. He's usually swift and decisive in business, but in private, he's actually so afraid of his wife." Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows and glanced at him. "Oh, so you're saying that President Gu has a high status in the family?" Gu Jinglian's lips twitched and he said indignantly, "I have the highest status in the family." "Dad, you're lying." Xiao Bao, who was at the side, mercilessly exposed a certain someone. At home, Daddy clearly listens to Mommy. Puhaha. The group of kids fell on the bed laughing. Gu Jinglian's face could not be any darker. Yu Yu teased Gu Jinglian even more, "Oh my god. Gu Jinglian, the dignified Gu Jinglian, has actually become a slave to his wife. I also heard that Auntie Chu Ho's status in the Gu family seems to be higher. Of course. Xiao Bao said proudly, no matter how big or small the family is, Mom makes more decisions. Dad wanted to fight for his position at first, but he failed in the end. Gu Jinglian couldn't take it anymore and punched him mercilessly. Sometimes, she really wanted to slap Xiao Bao to the wall, the kind that couldn't be pulled down. How could he trick his own father like that? Ever since he was young, he didn't have any other skills, but his ability to tear him down was not small. Xiao Bao hid behind Yun Shishir and pointed at Gu Jinglian as he complained, "Dad, you're using domestic violence. I'm going to become an idiot because of you. It's best if you become an idiot. Dad will take care of you for the rest of your life." It was better to be an idiot than to have such a ridiculous setting. Yun Shishir tried so hard to hold back her laughter that her stomach hurt. However, she really couldn't tell that Gu Jinglian had such a low status in the family. This didn't seem like his style of doing things. Beside them, Jing Yang said quietly, "Why do I feel that our ward is different from the other wards?" The group looked at him and asked, "What do you mean?" "This morning, I heard someone crying in the ward next door. I feel that many wards in the quarantine area are lifeless, but our ward is a little special." Chapter 45:15. Rather than saying that it was special, it was more like the flu wasn't a big deal at all. This was a flu that could kill people. When Jing Qi found out that he was going to enter the quarantine zone, she hugged Jing Yang and cried once. After arriving at the quarantine zone, Jing Yang was originally depressed. However, when he met Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen, this pair of clowns, he couldn't be depressed even if he wanted to. Xiao Yichen lay on the hospital bed in a daze and said disapprovingly, "What's the big deal about a flu virus? I've seen all kinds of things and I've gone through life and death with Yu Yu several times. It's just a flu virus." Everyone looked at him. However, Xiao Yichen's retribution soon came. The next day, Xiao Yichen's condition took a turn for the worse. His high fever didn't subside. He had a strong constitution since he was young and rarely fell sick. However, his fever suddenly rose to 39.8 degrees Celsius. Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja only went back at night. When they came back the next day, Xiao Yichen was lying limply on the bed and couldn't move at all. He had paid the price for his big words yesterday. For some reason, Yu looked at Xiao Yichen who was lying limply on the bed with his eyes half closed and a thermometer in his mouth. It was clearly a very serious matter, but she felt like laughing. Did Xiao Yichen's words yesterday count as setting a flag? In the morning, the news broadcast on the television reported a few cases of illness. There was a death in the hospital affiliated to Southwest University of China. Furthermore, the flu virus this time had already spread around the world. The World Health Organization had already named the flu virus shaman. According to research, it should have originated from a person who ate sick pork that died from the coronavirus and had a high fever that didn't subside, leading to pneumonia. The virus was spread through the air. However, the virus had to pass through many levels of immune protection in the body. Adult immunity was stronger, but children's immunity was weaker. Therefore, the flu this time was more common among children. The flu virus would stay in the body for a period of time. Simply put, if the person didn't survive the high fever and subsequently developed pneumonia, it would be fatal. If they survived the fever and didn't have any major problems after a period of observation, they would have a preliminary immunity to the virus and would not be infected again. However, Xiao Yichen's sudden collapse caught everyone off guard. Xiao Yichen had a good physique. Mu Yaja had said that he rarely fell sick when he was young and rarely caught a cold. He had been in good health since he was young. No one had expected him to fall sick all of a sudden. The doctor explained that whether it was a child or an adult, it was not a good thing to be sick often or not. They often fell sick because their bodies were weak, but if they didn't fall sick for a long time, the body's antibodies would become less and less. When a serious illness came, it would be difficult to resist. This was because the body would produce antibodies to the virus after recovering from the illness. The next time the illness occurred, it wouldn't be so serious. If the body had minor illnesses frequently, the body would produce more antibodies, and the ability to resist the disease would be strengthened. Catching a cold was a detoxification process. Xiao Yichen rarely fell sick. Therefore, when the flu came aggressively, his body lacked the antibodies to resist it, and he collapsed immediately. Other than him, Yue Yao and Jing Yang's conditions improved a lot. Xiao Bao and Yu Yu were still in the same condition. They were neither good nor bad. The doctor said that Xiao Yichen's condition was more serious. If his high fever didn't subside, it would lead to viral pneumonia, and his life would be in danger. Chapter 45:16. Yun Shishir was scared out of her wits and stayed by Xiao Yichen's bedside. Yue Yao's heart ached for her brother as well. She recalled how Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu had fought over the tangerines she had peeled a few days ago. In the end, she had given the tangerines to Jing Yang. She had peeled 2 tangerines and wanted to give them to Xiao Yichen. Although she was still young, she could vaguely understand the doctor's words. When she found out that Xiao Yichen's condition was not optimistic, she was naturally unhappy. Jing Yang's heart ached when he saw this. He accompanied Yue Yao to stay by Xiao Yichen's bedside. Xiao Yichen had just woken up from his drip and saw a group of people surrounding his bedside. His eyes widened in shock, and he almost cried out in fright. Yun Shishir saw that he was crying and was extremely nervous. She hurriedly asked what was going on. In the end, Xiao Yichen said something that shocked everyone and made them not know whether to laugh or cry. "Am I dying? What do you mean? Did the doctor say that I can't be saved?" Xiao Yichen rubbed his eyes and cried pitifully. "Why are all of you surrounding me? It's as if you're looking at me for the last time." "Pooh!" Yun Shishir hurriedly spat a few times. "What nonsense are you talking about? What do you mean you can't be saved? What do you mean you can't be saved? Everyone is just worried about you and wants to take care of you." Xiao Yichen's eyes were still red. "I thought my condition had worsened and they wanted me to leave a will." "Pooh!" Yu Yu spat heavily. "If you keep spouting nonsense, I'll beat you up." "Xiao Yichen, be good. As long as you get through the fever and don't contract pneumonia, you'll be fine." Xiao Yichen nodded. Yun Shishir hurriedly scooped out a bowl of porridge that she had just cooked. "Here, have some porridge. Eat more nutrients to increase your immune system." "Yes." Xiao Yichen didn't like porridge, but he couldn't eat anything right now. Because of the fever, he had no appetite at all. Not only that, he felt that he was about to become muddle-headed from the fever. His head was extremely heavy. He rarely had a fever, so he had experienced the pain of a high fever. His head hurt, and his eyes hurt. It was so painful that his eyeballs felt like they were about to pop out. Because he was constantly blowing and wiping his nose, it was as if a layer of skin was being rubbed off from his nose. Yun Shishir patiently fed him a bowl of porridge. In the end, Xiao Yichen woke up from his afternoon nap and felt his stomach churn. He threw himself into the trash can beside the bed and vomited. The porridge that he had eaten in the morning was all vomited out in the afternoon. After vomiting, he collapsed onto the bed as if he had lost all his strength. His stomach acid churned, and he felt so uncomfortable that tears fell from his eyes. Yun Shishir's heart ached as she watched from the side. When had Xiao Yichen ever suffered like this? She couldn't help but recall Yu Yu's childhood. She had also suffered like this in the hospital. She wished that she could take Xiao Yichen's place and suffer like this. Because Xiao Yichen had collapsed, the atmosphere in the ward became much heavier. The entire quarantine zone fell into a gloomy atmosphere. Everyone was on tenterhooks, afraid that they would be the first patient to die in the quarantine zone of the hospital. Outside the ward, the doctors and nurses were wearing protective clothing as they paced back and forth. At such a time, such a scene was inexplicably terrifying. Xiao Yichen didn't allow Yue Yao to lie beside his bed because he was worried that she would pass the flu to her. Chapter 45:17. Yun Shishir also felt sorry for Xiao Yichen, but she was also worried that Yueyao would be worried about her brother. Therefore, she asked her to wear a thicker mask. Xiao Yichen was on an 4 drip for 2 consecutive days, and his condition kept fluctuating. One moment, his temperature would drop to 37 degrees, and at night, it would reach nearly 40 degrees. His entire body would be hot, and in the end, he would become delirious. Yun Shishir had not slept well for a few days. Mu Yaja felt sorry for her and suggested that she go home to get some sleep. She was unwilling, but in the end, Mu Yaja forced her to go home. She had not slept for a few days. Staying up all night would also affect her immune system. In addition, Yun Shishir had a delicate and weak body, so Mu Yaja was still worried. After Yun Shishir went home, he was responsible for taking care of the 3 little guys. In the past, Mu Yaja would definitely not be able to take care of himself. The 3 little guys would definitely make a mess. However, ever since Yun Shishir was pregnant with Yueyao, he had to take care of everything from the pregnancy to the delivery, to the confinement, and breastfeeding period. Who was born to do housework and take care of babies? Wasn't it all acquired through training? When Yueyao grew up, Mu Yaja also had the ability to take care of babies. When he took care of babies, he was not inferior to a top nanny. However, on the other hand, Chu Ho had to take care of the 2 little guys. They had just been weaned, and their immune system was too weak. If she went to the hospital too often, she would have to be isolated from the 2 little guys. Therefore, the heavy responsibility of taking care of Xiao Bao fell on Gu Jinglian's shoulders. However, Gu Jinglian had always been taken care of. When did he have the experience of taking care of others? When Chu Ho was in confinement, he volunteered to take care of his wife during her confinement, but in the end, he took care of her in a mess. In the end, he was chased away by Chu Ho. Xiao Bao was hospitalized, and Uncle Fu was old. If it were anyone else, they would be worried as well. Moreover, Xiao Bao also said that he wanted Gu Jinglian to accompany him. Naturally, Gu Jinglian could only do it himself. In the end, Xiao Bao regretted it a few days later. How did Gu Jinglian clean his face? Just like wiping a table, she covered Xiao Bao's face with the face towel like a rag. Then, like kneading dough twists, she rubbed his face until it was red. Gu Jinglian believed that since her face was red, she must have scrubbed it clean. Every time he finished scrubbing his face, Xiao Bao's face would turn red as if he was drunk. It was as if a layer of his skin had been peeled off. Gu Jinglian felt a sense of accomplishment. Xiao Bao then looked to the side and saw how Mu Yaja was gently wiping Xiao Yichen's face and hands. He was so jealous that he was speechless. He patted the blanket and shouted at Gu Jinglian's back view indignantly, "Dad! What's the use of being handsome? You don't know how to cook or wash clothes. You can't even take care of a patient well. Can your handsome face be used as food?" Gu Jinglian turned around gloomily. He was about to flare up, but since Xiao Bao said that he was handsome, he was satisfied. Xiao Yichen was not convinced when he heard this. He supported his weak body to sit up and said indignantly, "Is your dad handsome?" "He's not as handsome as my dad." "Humph. My dad is the most handsome in the world. He's the richest and the most gentle. Can your dad compare to him?" Chapter 45:18. Mu Yaja's eyelids twitched fiercely. It was understandable for children to brag and compete. But when did violence become a category of comparison? Tisk, tsk, tsk. My daddy won't compete with you in violence. Xiao Yichen gave him a thumbs up. My daddy is rich. My daddy has a lot of money. He can build a few Eiffel Towers for me to climb with his money. Mu Yaja almost vomited blood. He was secretly calculating if he could really build a few Eiffel Towers with his wealth. While he was still calculating, the 2 little guys had already started bragging. My daddy can cook Chinese food, Western food, pasta, instant noodles, and pizza. My father knows how to write song calligraphy in regular script and seal script. Every piece of calligraphy is priceless. Our family lives in a big villa. Our family has a big courtyard. My daddy's Xingyu Financial Group can buy your Gu Corporation. My daddy can buy Xingyu if he sells the Gu Mansion. Huff, huff. Huff, huff. The two little guys were panting after 300 rounds of verbal sparring. Yu Yu suddenly walked gracefully in front of Xiao Yichen and said calmly, "Xiao Yichen, open your mouth." Ah. What? As soon as Xiao Yichen opened his mouth, Yu Yu immediately stuck the thermometer into his mouth. Xiao Yichen frowned, held the thermometer in his mouth, and glared at Yu Yu. Wow, it's finally quiet. Yu Yu took a deep breath and suddenly felt that the world had become beautiful. Ha 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 ha. Who told you to show off? Now you can't say anything, right? While Xiao Bao was feeling smug, Gu Jinglian's tall figure had already approached. Before he could react, the big devil pinched his cheek and stuffed the thermometer into his mouth. This time, the two little guys were as quiet as chickens and stared at each other. However, even so, neither of them was convinced. They crossed their arms and glared at each other with resentment. 5 minutes later, Yu Yu took out the thermometer and looked at the temperature. His brows furrowed. Tisk, Mu Yaja came over sternly. How is it? The temperature has risen again. Yu Yu showed the thermometer to Mu Yaja. 39.5 degrees. High fevers are recurring. This situation is not optimistic. Gu Jinglian started to worry as well. Although they usually bickered, he was still worried about little Yichen's condition at critical moments. Should we call the doctor? The doctor came this morning and prescribed some medicine and drips, but his condition is still not improving. If this situation continues, little Yichen will be sent to the quarantine zone. The complete isolation zone was the severe isolation zone. That meant that his life could be in danger. Usually, a patient would be in a room in such an isolated area and no one would have the right to visit them. Xiao Yichen was also worried. He lay on the hospital bed and looked listless. Is the fever coming on again? The fever had already subsided this morning. Will I never recover? Try saying that again. Yu Yu and Mu Yaja said in unison. Xiao Yichen kept quiet. Xiao Bao couldn't bear to see him like this. All right, I won't argue with you anymore. It won't be too late to argue with me when you're fully recovered. Now, get some rest. Chapter 45:19. Xiao Yichen glanced at him resentfully from the corner of his eyes. That's why you should keep a distance from me. Don't get infected by me when the time comes. What's there to be afraid of? I'm not afraid of getting sick. Gu Jinglian suddenly became nervous and gave him a knock on the head. Don't raise a flag. Xiao Bao tilted his head. Dad, what's a flag? Gu Jinglian pinched his son's cheeks in disappointment. Although he was angry at him, his heart ached for him even more. These words were just like how a general would say to his beloved female lead in a TV series, "When I come back victorious, I'll marry you." It was as scary as that. However, Gu Jinglian's worries came true very quickly. The next day, Gu Jinglian woke up after a night of watching over Xiao Bao. He had a high fever. The doctor did his rounds and checked on his condition. He said that Xiao Bao's condition had worsened just like Xiao Yichen's. Hence, he suggested that Xiao Yichen and Xiao Bao be quarantined. This would be considered a completely quarantined area. Gu Jinglian's heart sank when he heard this. He was still wondering if he had not taken good care of Xiao Bao and Xiao Bao's condition had worsened instead. Mu Yaja also could not bear to send Xiao Yichen to quarantined alone. After all, if they were quarantined alone, he would not have the right to visit them. Xiao Yichen would definitely be lonely in the quarantined area alone. However, since the doctor had said so, Mu Yaja had no choice but to agree for Xiao Yichen's sake. Gu Jinglian naturally agreed. He had even thought that Xiao Bao would recover soon and be discharged from the hospital. He did not expect Xiao Bao's condition to worsen as well. Chu Ho and Yun Shishir found out that they would be transferred to the quarantine area in the afternoon. Despite Mu Yazhe and Gu Jinglian's attempts to stop them, they insisted on coming over to take a look. Both of them were worried sick. In the afternoon, Yun Shishir and Chu Ho rushed over one after another. Xiao Bao and Xiao Yichen's conditions had taken a turn for the worse. Whatever they ate, they would vomit it out after a while. Not only did they have a high fever, but their mental states were also worrying. Yue Yao secretly hid in the bathroom and cried. Jing Yang accompanied her and couldn't bear it. Yu Yu stayed by Xiao Yichen's bedside and held his hand tightly. Although he usually found this older brother annoying, Xiao Yichen was in a critical situation. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't help but cry. Even though he was seriously injured, he endured it and didn't cry. Facing the extremely weak Xiao Yichen, Yu couldn't hold back his tears anymore. He clenched his teeth and covered his face as he cried secretly. Xiao Yichen could only open his eyes and look at him. He didn't even have the strength to speak. He wanted to raise his head and hold Yu Yu's hand to comfort him and tell him not to worry, but he didn't even have the strength to speak. Xiao Bao's condition wasn't any better. He was much more delicate than Xiao Yichen to begin with. Initially, he was still strong enough to endure the pain of his high fever. However, when he saw Chu Ho, he immediately broke down and sobbed sadly. "Mom. I feel terrible." He felt as if his entire body was on fire, but he was also extremely cold. He felt hot with the blanket wrapped around him, but without the blanket, he was so cold that he shivered. He didn't even have the strength to get out of bed. Chu Ho rushed over and hugged him tightly. She couldn't bear to part with him. She had secretly asked the doctor about Xiao Bao's condition, but the doctor couldn't be sure. Chapter 45-20. After all, no one was prepared for the sudden onset of the flu. What he meant was that Xiao Bao and Xiao Yichen were in a similar predicament. As for the other children, even though they were not suffering from any symptoms yet, they could not rule out the possibility that the flu virus was still in its incubation stage. Since it was an unknown flu, no one could determine the mortality rate, cure rate, and sequelae of the flu. All they could do was try their best to save the children and study them. Many hospitals in the capital had news of nurses and doctors collapsing. A few nurses' immune systems had deteriorated due to inadequate protection and working overtime. Unfortunately, they were infected. Apart from that, many doctors had been fighting on the front lines for a long time and fell ill from overwork. Some even died on the operating table. The constant news reports made the public anxious and immersed themselves in the fear of the flu. On the streets, in the shopping malls, and in schools, everyone was wearing a mask. Taking the temperature every morning had become a routine. The thermometers in the pharmacies were sold out. In the alleys of the city, everyone was on tenterhooks, afraid that they would fall victim to the flu virus. Even if they could not accept it, they had no choice but to accept it. Yun Shishir secretly cried in the bathroom for a long time. She wiped her tears and applied cold water to her face before walking out of the bathroom. She walked to Xiao Yichen's bedside and replaced Yu Yu. Xiao Yichen gently held Yun Shishir's hand. He looked at the doctors and nurses who had surrounded the bed and asked nervously, "Mommy, am I going to be quarantined?" "Yeah." Yun Shishir squeezed his palm and choked back her sobs. "It's okay. It's just a small problem. Mommy will wait for you to get better, okay?" "Yeah, I think it's just a small problem too." Xiao Yichen blinked and said disapprovingly, "I'm in good health. How can I be defeated by such a small flu virus?" "Yeah." Yun Shishir nodded her head vigorously as though she was using Xiao Yichen's words to convince herself. Xiao Yichen couldn't bear to see her holding back her sadness. He pursed his lips and looked at the ceiling to hold back his tears. He was not afraid of getting sick, but he was afraid that Yun Shishir would be worried. She was so fragile. If she worried about him all the time, she would not be able to eat or sleep well. He must not show any signs of weakness, otherwise she would be even more worried. Therefore, Xiao Yichen pretended to be relaxed and said, "Mommy, when I leave the quarantine zone, I want to eat your black pepper steak. That will have to wait until you come out. For the sake of Mommy's black pepper steak, I have to work hard to get healthy." Xiao Yichen said confidently, "Don't worry, Mommy. I won't make you wait for too long." The doctor and nurse looked at each other and felt a little sad. The nurse walked over and said to Xiao Yichen, "Little boy, say goodbye to your daddy and mommy, okay?" "I don't need to say goodbye." Xiao Yichen's voice was a little choked up, but he still said stubbornly, "I'll be back soon." He and Xiao Bao were moved to a gurney and slowly pushed out of the ward. A group of people surrounded them as they walked towards the quarantine zone. 2 hospital beds were pushed to the quarantine zone door, one after the other. Xiao Bao's bed was pushed over to be next to Xiao Yichen's. Chapter 45-21. Xiao Yichen saw the fear and trepidation in Xiao Bao's eyes. He reached out his hand and said, "Come, hold my hand." Through the mask, Little Treasure winked mischievously at him and held his hand in the same way. Perhaps to Xiao Bao, the flu was just an ordinary cold. It wasn't that serious. However, Xiao Yichen was deeply aware of what he and Xiao Bao were facing at the same time. It was a test of life. If they couldn't pass this test, they might not be able to survive. He heard from the doctor that although he had a good physique, he rarely fell sick since he was young. Because of this, his body produced very few antibodies. As a result, his illness came like a landslide. He didn't have many antibodies to defend against the flu virus. Hence, he collapsed. The 2 children were sent to the quarantine area. Yun Shishir was distracted all day and all night. She didn't know when Xiao Yichen would be able to walk out of the coma. However, at the same time, there was good news. Yueyao's condition was slowly improving. If there were no accidents within a week, he should be able to be discharged. Yu had to be observed for a period of time. During this period of time, Yun Shishir was invited by the company to participate in a charity performance. It was a song that praised the Angel in White. It was used to encourage the medical staff on the front line. At the same time, it was used to calm the panic of the public. Yun Shishir suppressed her worry and went to the sound engineer to record a demo. Xiao Yichen and Xiao Bao were sent to the quarantine area. The ward suddenly quieted down. Gu Jinglian had been staying in the ward for the past few days. Xiao Bao wasn't around and Mu Yaja couldn't take care of Yueyao and Yu on his own. Moreover, Jing Qi was also ill. Hence, Gu Jinglian helped to take care of Jing Yang. Jing Yang was especially afraid of Gu Jinglian. There was a type of person who, no matter how good-looking he was, had an irresistible aura that made people flinch at the sight of him. Gu Jinglian belonged to this type of person. No matter how calm and approachable he appeared, he couldn't hide his sharp aura at all. Every time Gu Jinglian wiped his face, Jing Yang would be as quiet as a puppet. He wouldn't move at all. Yu was speechless. Was Gu Jinglian that scary? Why was Jing Yang so afraid? For a few days, there was no news about Xiao Bao and Xiao Yichen's condition. They didn't know if their conditions had improved or worsened. The man looked calm on the surface, but in reality, he was more worried than anyone else. Yueyao and Yu Yu's were. Yichen Yu's. Yu said, "Actually, we seem to have neglected little Yichen. Even if he's my brother, he's not much older than me. He was only born an hour or 2 earlier than me, but he bears more responsibilities than anyone else." As the saying went, the crying child would get candy. However, Xiao Yichen was too stingy with his tears. Perhaps Mu Yaja had given him a special education since he was young. When he was half an adult, he was thrown into a special training camp. He had developed a strong character. No matter how wronged he was, he wouldn't cry easily. In front of Yu, he also relied on his identity as Yu's elder brother. He took care of Yu just as much as Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir. He was very attentive. Chapter 45-22. In Yun Shishir's heart, a bowl of water was not full. In addition, Yu Yu had always been weak, so she focused on Yu Yu and ignored Xiao Yichen's needs. Xiao Yichen also rarely asked for any conditions because he felt that as an older brother, he should be more sensible and not act like a spoiled child. It was because he did not fight for anything, and did not even act like a spoiled child. This made it easier for people to overlook his desires. The more sensible a child was, the easier it was for people to forget that he was still a child. Xiao Yichen was only a little over 10 years old. Like Yu Yu, he also had times when his immune system was weak. At such a time, Xiao Yichen still had a youthful sense of heroism. Yun Shishir was restless all day. Although Mu Yaja maintained his composure on the surface, only God knew how worried he was. Compared to them, Gu Jinglian was much calmer. Even though Chu Ho came to the hospital later and wanted to visit and was rejected, she was much calmer than Yun Shishir. Even though Xiao Bao was now in the quarantine area, which was equivalent to the intensive care unit, not just anyone could visit him. She also thought optimistically that being quarantined would only be temporary. Children who liked to smile would have good luck. Xiao Bao would definitely get better. It had to be said that emotions could be infectious. Chu Ho's strength and optimism also infected Yun Shishir. Yun Shishir finally pulled herself together. When Yun Shishir pulled herself together, Mu Yaja naturally calmed down a lot. However, it was impossible to say that she was not worried about Xiao Bao at all. Chu Ho refused to leave the hospital. The two little guys had already been entrusted to Uncle Fu's mother. She insisted on staying in the hospital and waiting for Xiao Bao to come out of the quarantine area. She usually helped Yun Shishir take care of the children. With her and Gu Jinglian around, the burden on Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir was much lighter. One time when they were free, Yun Shishir couldn't help but ask curiously, "Chu Ho, aren't you worried about Xiao Bao?" "Not worried." "How could he not be worried?" "I will only be more worried than you. But you seem to be much calmer than me." When Chu Ho heard this, he smiled and said, "What else can I do? Am I supposed to panic and not choose a path? Xiao Bao is in the quarantine zone. He must miss me a lot. The only thing I can do every day is to call him and hear him tell me that he's safe." It was because I wanted to cheer him up that I had to be spirited. You know, emotions can be contagious. Only when I show confidence can I make him believe that his illness is just a minor illness and maintain a positive attitude. When Yun Shishir heard this, she nodded and said, "I also want to encourage Xiao Yichen. However, it seems like I'm the one who needs more encouragement. A mother is strong. A mother is the child's biggest reliance. However, Shishir, you are already very strong. Don't worry, everything will be fine." Chu Ho patted her shoulder gently. Yun Shishir was already stronger than she had imagined. If her children were quarantined, she would not be able to be so calm. In fact, in the quarantine area, Xiao Yichen's condition was not very good. He was originally the strongest one, but in the quarantine area, he was critically ill. Because of his high fever, he contracted viral pneumonia. Viral pneumonia could be understood as the late stage of influenza. Chapter 45-23. Xiao Yichen also knew that his condition was getting worse. Every time he saw the medical staff enter the ward fully equipped to take care of him, give him injections and infusions, and put on more and more masks, he gradually understood that his condition was not as optimistic as he had imagined. However, he did not want Yun Shishir to worry. Even though he had a high fever and was dizzy, he still managed to stay awake and talk to her for more than 10 minutes. Once, after hanging up the phone, he fainted and was on the verge of going into shock due to exhaustion. In the end, the medical staff used a pacemaker to pull him back from the jaws of death. He did not dare to say anything about all this. What? The flu is raging all over the world. Hua Jin held Alice's shoulder anxiously. Is the flu virus serious this time? I spoke to Yun Shishir on the phone and she said that all the hospitals are overcrowded. Moreover, the customs all over the world are heavily guarded and it's very difficult to pass through. Even if one had a fever or a cold one day, they would be quarantined for observation. The whole world was in a state of high alert. This flu is very aggressive and has spread crazily all over the world. According to the researchers, the first case was a person who accidentally ate a piece of infected pork and went abroad for a vacation. This flu is the most contagious among children. Even adults with weak immune systems can't escape from it. Hua Jin said with lingering fear, "At first, I thought it was just a common cold. Later, I heard that there were already deaths. Now, I heard that Xiao Yichen's condition is very serious. Yue Yao and Yu are still quarantined in the hospital. I wonder how they are doing." Initially, when he found out that the 3 little guys were infected with the flu, he was in a hurry to go back. However, the customs clearance was very strict. Anyone with the slightest sign of a cold would be quarantined. Even those who seemed to be perfectly healthy had to go through health procedures. The global tourism industry was in a terrible downturn. Because of this flu, all the industries in the world were facing huge losses. So far, there have been hundreds of deaths around the world. Among them, there are many doctors who died in the line of duty. Hua Jin was a little restless. "By the way, is there any news from Gong Jie recently?" Alice shook her head. "Thanks to the flu, there's been no news from Gong Jie. So far, we haven't gotten any news about him. He can't be trapped in another country's territory, right? It's not impossible." Alice was also worried. "But don't worry too much. Do you think Gong Jie might have accidentally contracted the flu? After all, the flu is raging all over the world now, and many people are infected without any precautions. How would I know? I'm not one of his immune cells." Alice narrowed her eyes and changed the topic. "You seem to be very concerned about him. Aren't you worried?" Alice replied truthfully. "I'm worried." How could he not be worried? It was just that she wasn't as obvious as he was. Hua Jin disagreed. "Isn't it normal to be worried?" Alice said, "Don't worry. With Gong Jie's physique, he'll definitely." Chapter 45-24. Alice widened her eyes in shock. "What? Don't raise flags." "Flag? What flags? What did he mean by that? Haven't you heard of it?" In many television dramas, the general would say to his childhood sweetheart, "When I'm done with this war, I'll come back and marry you." And then? Hua Jin looked gloomy. And then the general never came back. He died on the battlefield. Alice was speechless. Look, Shusher also said that with Xiao Yichen's amazing physique, he won't fall sick easily. Look, his illness came like a landslide. He's completely quarantined now. Shusher can't even see him more than a few times now. Alice licked her lips awkwardly and started to fidget. Pooh! She hurriedly spat it out. Hua Jin slumped on the sofa. He wanted to go back to China, but he couldn't. He didn't know where Gong Jie was. Although it was absolutely safe here, he couldn't go anywhere else. Anxiety. Anxiety, it was another torturous few days. There was good news from the hospital. The authoritative professor had already extracted the influenza virus DNA in the research lab and put it into the research of a vaccine. Everyone was looking forward to the development of a vaccine to cure this influenza virus as soon as possible. Chu Ho inquired about Xiao Bao's condition from the office. Compared to Xiao Yichen, Xiao Bao's condition was gradually stabilizing. You should be on good terms with Mu Yichen's parents, right? The doctor asked in a roundabout manner. Chu Ho nodded. She came to the office alone. Yun Shusher didn't come with her. Hence, the doctor told her everything. Compared to Xiao Bao, Mu Yichen's condition doesn't seem to be as optimistic. A child with the same condition as him has unfortunately passed away this morning. Chu Ho's expression froze when she heard this. What do you mean by that? I want her to be mentally prepared, but I don't dare to say this in front of her. Chu Ho's gaze fell on the stack of files beside the doctor's hand. On top of it was a report on the donation of a body for medical research. In the age column, the person who wrote it was only 7 years old. This file should be from the child who passed away this morning from the flu that the doctor mentioned. Only 7 years old, he was still so young. He was about the same age as Xiao Bao. Chu Ho felt her heart ache just thinking about it. If she were in their shoes, she really couldn't imagine how the child's parents endured the pain and signed the agreement to donate the body. The doctor looked at the report and let out a long sigh. There were obvious traces of tears at the corner of his eyes. She was a very lovely girl. Before she died, she said that her wish was to eliminate this influenza. Her parents are university professors. After learning of their daughter's wish, they signed the donation agreement. Chu Ho clenched her fists. She calmed herself down and asked, then, Xiao Chen. Is his condition that serious too? The doctor replied truthfully, yes, it's much more serious than this. What? Xiao Chen's condition was worse than this girl's. Then, wouldn't it be very dangerous? That was impossible. When he was video chatting with Yun Shishir, he clearly appeared to be very relaxed. Chapter 45-25. There were no signs at all. For some reason, Chu Ho's heart sank. Xiao Bao's condition had stabilized, but for some reason, because of Xiao Chen, she couldn't feel happy or excited at all. She really liked Xiao Chen. Back then, Gu Jinglian had also mentioned this child. In order to protect Lisa and Yu Yu, Xiao Chen had sacrificed an unimaginable amount of effort. Why was the illness so unfair to this sensible and obedient child? When Chu Ho returned to the ward, Yun Shishir had just finished washing the clothes. When she saw Chu Ho, she quickly went up to her and asked, Chu Ho, have you asked the doctor? How's Xiao Bao's condition? When Chu Ho saw her, she didn't know how to answer. She could only smile and say, the doctor said that Xiao Bao's condition has stabilized. Really? Yun Shishir's eyebrows relaxed happily. She was genuinely happy for her. That's great. Does this mean that if there are no accidents, Xiao Bao will be able to leave the quarantine area soon? Before the vaccine is developed, we can't be sure. If he hasn't fully recovered, he can't leave the quarantine area. Then, at least this means that Xiao Bao's condition is much better. Yun Shishir asked again, did the doctor say anything about Xiao Chen's condition? Chu Ho was speechless. Her expression suddenly darkened. She was someone who couldn't hide her thoughts. When Xiao Chen was mentioned, her expression turned ugly. When Yun Shishir saw this, she immediately guessed something. She asked tentatively, the doctor said that Xiao Chen's condition isn't very optimistic, right? Yeah. What's the situation? Yun Shishir grabbed her hand and said, Chu Ho, tell me the truth. Shishir, I don't want to hide it from you. Xiao Chen's condition is critical. His condition is more serious than you think. There's a little girl who just this morning. Her parents signed the agreement to donate her body. Xiao Chen's condition is much worse than hers. Even the doctors are impressed. Perhaps it's because of his strong willpower that he's able to hold on until now. Before Chu Ho could finish his words, Yun Shishir's eyes widened and tears rolled down her cheeks. When Chu Ho saw this, he was even more at a loss. Shishir, I didn't want to tell you at first, but I hope that you're mentally prepared. Nobody wants the worst to happen, but I can't hide anything from you. Yun Shishir lowered her head and wiped her tears with the back of her hand. It's okay, it's okay. I asked you to tell the truth. But even though she was comforting him like this, his tears still flowed even more violently. Yun Shishir choked a little and said, that's impossible. Xiao Chen and I video call each other every night. He seems very optimistic when I see his condition. I even thought that he would recover soon. I've already made plans to get him out of the hospital. Chu Ho sighed and said, that's because he didn't want you to worry. Actually, he knows his own condition best. I heard that there was one time when he went into shock after hanging up the phone because he was exhausted. He had to use a pacemaker to pull him back. Ah, Yun Shishir became nervous. Should I not video call him every day? Shishir, sit down first. When Chu Ho saw Yun Shishir's helpless expression, his heart ached terribly. Yun Shishir was extremely disappointed. Chapter 45-26. In front of Chu Ho, Yun Shishir wanted to remain calm. However, when she thought about how Xiao Yichen had forced himself to smile during the video call, the more sensible he was, the more her heart ached. When she thought about the possibility of losing him, the memories of the past resurfaced. Or perhaps, when she was about to lose him, she regretted not doing enough and had many regrets. She broke down and covered her face as she let out a suppressed cry. When Chu Ho saw this, his heart ached unbearably. She might not be able to empathize, but if the doctor told her today that Xiao Bao's condition was getting worse, she might break down even more than Yun Shishir. How is that possible? Yun Shishir couldn't figure it out. Shock. How could his condition be so serious? If it's already this serious, why didn't the doctor tell us? Chu Ho's expression was solemn. What's wrong with Xiao Yichen? Suddenly, Yu Yu's startled voice came from the door. Shock. What shock? Yun Shishir raised her head in shock and looked in Yu Yu's direction. However, she saw him holding Yueyao's hand and standing at the door with a stunned expression. His fingers, which were holding the door frame, were trembling uncontrollably. Mommy, what's wrong with Xiao Yichen? Didn't you say that if there were no accidents, he'd recover soon? She didn't know when he had stood at the door, nor did she know how much he had heard. Yun Shishir was a little flustered. Yu. Don't be nervous, I heard everything just now. Yu said directly, I heard you guys say that Xiao Yichen's condition is very dangerous. What's going on? Yun Shishir bit her lip and didn't say anything. Mommy, tell me. Yu walked over quickly. Yueyao was also frightened. Tears fell from her eyes. Children did not know how to hold back. Wah! She cried. Chu Ho was completely flustered. He hurriedly walked over and picked up Yueyao. Yueyao, don't cry, I don't want you. I want Big Brother. As Yueyao spoke, she couldn't stop crying. She clenched her fists and kicked her legs. I miss Big Brother. I want to see Big Brother. I haven't seen him for a long time. Woo. I want Big Brother. Yu grabbed Yun Shishir's hand tightly and almost interrogated her. Mommy, tell me. I don't know. I really don't know anything. What's going on with Xiao Yichen? I don't have any information at all. When Yu heard this, he frowned. His eyes flickered for a moment before he turned around and rushed out of the ward. Yun Shishir chased after him, only to see him rushing towards the doctor's office. Doctor! He rushed to the door of the doctor's office. Without knocking, he pushed the door open and entered. The doctor was sitting in front of the desk. In front of him sat a young couple who looked very down. When Yu saw this scene, his heart skipped a beat. He didn't know why, but he immediately suppressed it. Yu, what's the matter? When the doctor saw him, he looked concerned. What happened? Where's my brother? Yu walked over and glanced at the young couple. He saw that their eyes were red and it was obvious that they had been crying not long ago. When he saw the donation agreement on the table, his face turned pale with fright.